Hello, guys. We're back. Southern Belle Atheism. I'm with Aki Muthali, and she's in Canada, I believe, and she's an atheist writer, a journalist, lovely person who I met on Twitter through Lalo and Andy, and so the beautiful Aki. And take it away.
Hi, it's nice to be here. I've had an over an hour, almost an hour and a half delay because of traffic, and then by the time I got home, my brother, who's like a nerd, he has like six monitors, and like the sound wouldn't work, and we had all these technical difficulties, and we're finally here. And I hope
Mhm.
you guys can hear me fine. As long as you guys can understand, it's good. It's good.
Yeah, yeah.
So let's get started.
Yeah, Aki will just have to talk up a little bit because it's coming across soft on my end, but I don't know exactly. I don't want to turn on the volume, but hopefully everyone can hear her okay. I can hear her though. So yeah, so we're going to be talking about just Star Trek and feminism and all that jazz today. And I know we've been tweeting at each other online, and I like a lot of your tweets, and we share a lot of the same views and stuff. And I guess just to just start off, like, this is kind of a general question, kind of a hokey question, but like, what is feminism to you? Because a lot of people don't really understand like the waves of feminism and the history, and
Mhm.
everyone seems to have their own definition.
Well, for me, feminism, it goes back to what it has always been, which is social, political, and financial equality amongst all of the sexes and all of the genders. And I know that a lot of people like to conflate um, people like feminists with self-proclaimed feminists like Anita Sarkeesian and uh, Christina Sommers, and they tend to um, tend to kind of not exactly represent feminism for what it has always been. They kind of started to interpret it as their own, but then they liked the platform that feminism gave them. So
Mhm.
they started calling themselves feminism while completely dismissing the values of feminism itself. So Anita Sarkeesian, on one hand, she will be complaining about, Gamergate and being called. She's gonna cry to the UN that being called an idiot is like some form of violence against women and girls. And to me, that was appalling. It was simply idiotic because I would never ever confuse verbal like an insult
Mhm.
to violence because they're two completely different things, and we
Mhm.
should remind ourselves never to cheapen violence by um, by such erroneous conflations. And and then as for Christina Sommers, I have never actually seen her um, defending people's women's rights or men's right. Well, I think I've seen her defending men's rights, but I have never seen her defending women's right. um, every single time there is a conversation about discrimination against women and girls, what I see Christina Summers doing is she's like, oh, I'm going to like, um, you know, look at this like it's a myth, and I am going to tell you how it's not real. Like she thinks like this is like something that for her to what's the word that they use? I forgot exactly the word that they use for this, but they basically say that all these government statistics are fake. But then at the same time, when it comes to their own convenience, they will be using the exact source of statistics to support violence against men. But then when it comes to violence against women, then they're like, oh look, these are all myths. This is being misinterpreted. We
Yeah.
need to actually analyze all of this, and we can't all say that like women are being exclusively abused when it comes to gender-based violence. I mean, yes, like a great majority of women who are being abused are by males, and it originates from a certain base which says that women are supposed to be submissive, and that they can't really be assertive. And if they're being an assertive, then they're a bitch, and that somehow they deserve to be slapped around and beaten and raped, you know? And so once again, so what is feminism to me? Feminism to me is not what Christina Sommers represents or what Anita Sarkeesian represents. To me, feminism is the absolute equality between all of the sexes and genders in all fronts: financial, economic, um, social, and political fronts. You know, and if I see discrimination against men, I will say, hey, look, that's discriminatory. If I see discrimination against women, I'm going to call that out too. You know, so to me, equality is basically exactly what it is. It's feminism is about equality and justice.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, that you made an excellent point about the fact that we don't need to conflate someone calling someone a name, or someone calling someone like idiot, for example, or even something worse. You know, we don't need to say that that's the same thing as physical violence. Yes, there actually is verbal abuse that's systematic and psychological and all that jazz. But as far as what you're talking about with the Sarkeesian stuff, I completely agree. And that's a problem I kind of see too, as well, is the whole notion of, you know, the whole safe space stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And then, because, you know, you have like all these like college kids, for example, what happened at Yale about the Halloween costumes, because you have all this stuff, the backlash you're getting from that, you're getting the Donald Trumps that really are potentially volatile. And so you've got people who are uber politically correct that are cry bullies, and you've got people who are more traditional bullies that are very verbally aggressive over here. And so, and that, of course, that's the backlash to that politically correct movement. And I think even Bill Maher pointed that out a few weeks ago on his show about how now we have these two extremes and they're playing off of each other. And it's like a lot of the things that people are caring about are just, for example, are just things what I would call trivial, like a lot of social issues that, like trivial stuff like Gamergate. Like I didn't really know anything about Gamergate until Andy told me, because I'm not a gamer. I didn't know anything about any of that, but I did know about Shirtgate. And I think that a lot of these people who fly under the banner of feminism, especially like third wave feminism or intersectionalism, they're always going after, they're always making just really dumb points that really shouldn't be points. And how do you feel about that?
So once again, it goes back to cheapening the struggles of people. They say that women should be more outraged over a shirt than a shirt and emojis. Oh my God. I saw this promotion on Twitter yesterday. 2 or 3 times it popped up on my screen, and it just like irked me like in the worst possible way. It's an always it's like the always brand, and they said, what kind of emojis represent girls? I'm like, oh my God, is this really the problem that girls have? Apparently, millions of emojis are used every single day by girls. And do these emojis represent girls? Why is this even a conversation in the first place?
I know, right?
Exactly. Why are we not talking about the fact that girls have underfunded sports programs? Girls face discrimination in certain fronts of society. Why, like, they do not have enough empowerment to be who they are. You know, as girls, they are constantly told that they should grow up, find a good husband, and live the housewife life. You know, like, why are we not talking about these systemic indoctrination that girls face? But instead, no, emojis. Always it's going to hire marketers and advertising firms, and they're going to pay them thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars to talk about emoji liberation. Think about that. Think about how much they have cheapened
They have. And what's really sad is, for those who don't know, Always is a maxi pad brand. It's a maxi pad brand, y'all. My dad just calls them all generically Kotex. He says it like that in Southern, like Kotex. Yeah, that is so wrong on so many levels that it's so funny. I mean, yeah, but that's an excellent point. Like that's awesome. And also, and another thing that this has even pissed off my mama. She doesn't understand why they're picking on Barbie doll. She does not understand why they're picking on Barbie doll. Like that's like a big thing with her. So yeah, and when we start worrying about like emojis and dolls, I think that we've completely missed the entire point of everything.
We have disconnected ourselves from reality.
Yes, exactly. And
That is very sad.
yeah.
That's very sad because it takes time away from things that actually need exposure, people who are actually suffering, people who need a voice, a platform to voice themselves and give solidarity for those who are being abused and who cannot speak for themselves. It takes
Exactly.
so much away from these people, from these individuals, these human beings whose rights are being trampled on. And meanwhile, we have overprivileged feminism. I guess we can call that now, right?
Yeah.
Feminism about emojis and shirts and it's I mean there's when we come down to micro analyzing how all these sentiments and outrage came to be. It starts at the root, which is okay, there is sexism, there is misogyny, and we are in fact girls are in fact being indoctrinated under this patriarchal, I guess you can call it a system of power. I mean, governance. They are being told that for a girl, she should be submissive, she should not be outspoken, she should not be independent. And believe it or not, like I've been here in Canada for about 24 years now, and many girls that I have grown up with, their first and most um, important objective is to grow up and find a good husband and raise children. And these are Western girls, and
Yeah.
I'm talking about like white girls, black girls, brown girls, Asian girls. Like it's like people don't see the negativity around how society molds girls to be one way and then molds boys to be in a completely different way, in a more dominant way to girls.
Yeah.
And they tend to um, always and deliberately underestimate what we as girls can become as an adult, as women.
Yeah.
Our roles are so limited. The expectations we have are so limited. And that's the problem. We are told that because we are women, oh, look, we're docile, we're not intelligent, we can't really do anything. But then at the same time, from the beginning of all civilizations, who has been tasked with raising children, with teaching children, like even, oh, and also speaking of teaching, even education was off limits for women and girls. Even the science world for the longest time
Yeah.
denied women and girls the right to be educated. Instead, they gave us religion.
Yeah.
We should be if we get raped, all the father has to do is all the rapist has to do is pay 50 shekels and voila, justice for women, right? And girls. And we're supposed to be always submitting ourselves to our husband. We should not have sex outside the marriage or before marriage. There's so much um, contradictions that women have to live up to, you know
Yeah, that's
men
very
would
true.
otherwise not, they would not hold themselves to that kind of bigotry. But for women, because we're women, we're short of penis, so we have to put up with all these nonsensical bullshit. I mean, that's what it is. It's bullshit. It's
Yeah.
nonsense. It doesn't even make any sense. But because we are women, we must adapt to all these irrational expectations, and then we should be happy about it. And the instant that we actually condemn it or even question and challenge it, then we get the MRAs, the men's rights activists. They're like, oh my God, look, women, they're trampling on our rights. Now men's rights are being taken away. Like, how does women
Oh goodness.
enjoying the same rights as you do take away your rights? Now you're just becoming more insecure that women are becoming just as equal as you are.
Yeah.
And it's just
Yeah.
insecurity. That's the bottom line. It's insecurity, and they want to
Yeah.
keep one half of the population subjugated because of it.
Yeah. Well, it's that either or, you know, either you have rights or you don't. And you know, and I see that argument from also very like what we would call, I guess, extreme radical feminist
Hmm.
or, but you know, with the whole, I just call the whole men's rights things, I just call that neo-misogyny because really it's
Yes,
just
it is.
misogyny rebranded. And actually my husband had an interesting perspective on that. He said the one thing that makes me really uncomfortable, they're like the KKK. Okay, for those y'all don't know, I'm in Alabama. The headquarters of the Ku Klux Klan is an hour away from me. And just to be clear, they use the same rhetoric like, oh, we're being oppressed, like the majority is being oppressed by the minority, or the oppressors are being oppressed by the oppressed. It's that same sort of weird, sort of twisted, convoluted wannabe logic that they use there. And that's one thing that really struck him. And I think a lot of it is, I don't know if it's meant to be a farce or it's meant to be funny, but it seems like a mockery of feminism. It doesn't really seem like a real movement or anything. It seems more like a mockery. So maybe they're just mocking feminism, some of them. But for the ones that seem to be more serious and really truly into that, my husband is he's like, yeah, that right there is the KKK of sexism, like how racism has the KKK, like MRAs are the KKK of sexism, is what my husband says.
Yes, your husband has a point because every single MRA that I have come across in person, they had this creepy, just overwhelming, creepy focus on hating women
Mm-hmm.
than actually, discussing how men are being discriminated. Like, for example, in family courts. But once again, it's this patriarchal society that we live in that says that, women are responsible for children. So this systemic bias plays out in family courts as well. Like the mother gets the children because children belong with the mother,
Mm-hmm.
you know and so sometimes when we come across abusive ex-wives, they will deny access to their children, and then courts would be like, yeah, well, it's okay because she's the mother, even though the law doesn't say that. The judge will still grant access I'm sorry, will still not grant access to the father based on just the claims that the mother made. And now I've seen this many times, and but you will never actually see an MRA addressing that. But instead, they will say, "Hey, look, feminism is destroying traditional families." Like that's like their banner. Feminism is responsible for the destruction of traditional families, and by
Mm-hmm.
traditional families, they mean women should not be divorcing their husbands, should not have the right to divorce their husbands. Women should not have the right to say no to the husband when they want to have sex. Women should not, basically they want to limit women's rights.
Mm-hmm.
And then they use like it's all about men's rights and men being discriminated. And it's that whole the victim mentality, that we often see anti-feminists use against feminists.
Mm-hmm.
But then at the same time they will be like supporting the MRAs, who, by the way, have like who's like the epitome of of a victim mentality, because they
Yeah,
think that
true
somehow
that.
women having rights is oppressive to them. And as you said, the KKK, your husband was spot
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. I mean, and it's amazing how many things you can draw, like the compare, you can compare and contrast things like that. Like
Yes.
extremes always have the same rhetoric. They're extremes of any movement, extremes of any type. They're always really, really rabid. They're always really hateful, and they never look at real issues. They never look at true human rights violations. It's always all this feelings, how I feel about it, and maybe what happened to me or what didn't happen to me. And I think a lot of the issues with the whole nuclear family, as far as what they're calling the traditional family, what broke that down was actually not feminism. It was the history of abuse, domestic violence,
Hmm.
and the history of child abuse. And basically, even going back to England, when we see like the law of primogeniture, where like the oldest son inherits everything and females are left with nothing, and
Hmm.
even whether it was legal or just social, those are the things that broke down the traditional family, if that's what they want to call it, because you can't, and people who don't seem to understand that, you have to like break it down and make it like dirt shit simple, like shit simple for them. You have to say, okay, well, look at it this way. What happens when you hold a kitten or a puppy too tightly?
Hmm.
It starts to smother them. They suffocate and they struggle to get away.
Yeah.
And then it becomes abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's a weird analogy to draw, but sometimes you have to do that when people are just they're just not getting it.
Mm-hmm.
So when you suffocate someone and when you treat someone like a doormat, that's not healthy, and it's not a family situation. Then it becomes property, it becomes ownership, and so that whole mentality and that whole way of treating women, that's what destroyed the nuclear family.
Exactly. And MRAs, they often say, traditional families, women and girls, women, their wives, and their daughters are no longer seen as a commodity. And
Hmm.
that really bothers them, that they no
Hmm.
longer have um, this social power to to uh, to jerk them around and to
Hmm.
smother them, like with the kitten analogy. It was perfect because that's basically what has been happening to women and girls, and it's still happening in the East. It's
Yes,
happening
yes,
legally it's being allowed to do.
yes. Hmm.
um, and people often get away with it,
Hmm.
and it's manifested so horribly to the degree where women and girls can be killed for honor, you know and because honor is defined by the submission of women and girls.
Yeah.
So when they defy uh, the social standards, and if they dare to file a complaint of rape against a husband or a stranger or a relative
Hmm.
or whoever, then immediately they have dishonored the family, and therefore she deserves to die. And
Yeah.
people justify it. Imagine your own family saying that you deserve to die because you were raped. You deserve to die because you divorced your husband.
Hmm.
Imagine the kind of helplessness that these women and girls feel.
And see, I don't think a lot of even feminists, even people who fly under that banner in the West, I don't think they get it. Women's rights are not human rights globally, and that's why we still need feminism. That right there, globally, women's rights, women and girls are not recognized as human beings in most of the world still, especially at talking about the East and Africa. And people here don't get it when I point that out. It's like they just sit here in their little Western North American bubble and they don't understand. Do you understand that if the recent stat from UNICEF is what is it, 125 million girls and women have been victims of female genital mutilation? That is a very serious thing that people don't even want to talk about or recognize here. And they'd rather, we mentioned Shirtgate, they'd rather bitch about something like that.
Exactly.
The fact that honor killings and what's happening in India with the rape gangs and the acid attacks is horrible things, that atrocities that are happening to women globally. And I think this is what really makes me angry when even when I see like Western feminists kind of just ignoring that and pretending like a Barbie doll is more offensive. How is a Barbie doll more offensive than that?
Exactly. And mostly because white guilt has a lot to do with that. People, especially when it comes to Western white feminists, they tend to set the bar pretty
Mhm.
low when it comes to women of color. But then when it comes to white women and their rights and the way society is supposed to look at them, they set the bar up high, you
Mhm.
know? So, but then at the same time, because of this whole intersectional, um, you know, inconsistencies, they often define abuse against women as against women of color as this cultural problem.
Mhm.
It's supposed to be romantic, like they look at us like we're these exotic little creatures, and this is just our way of life, and they have no right to talk about it because they're not women of color, they're not exotic
Mhm.
like us. And it's just so patronizing.
Yeah.
I get so sick and tired of hearing, and I call these feminists as pseudo feminists because they are
Yes.
basically dismissing their own feminist values to romanticize a culture, and a culture that
Yes.
is very abusive towards women of color and girls of color.
Yeah.
So, and then they say, oh, well, like white people, they colonized, they're imperialistic, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, but that really has nothing. It has jack shit to do with you
Yeah.
not, you not condemning the abuses that women of color have to face. You know, it has nothing. Your white guilt doesn't even come into this equation.
Hmm.
When women are being abused, you condemn it. Period.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
don't condemn
exactly.
it because you base it on color. You know, that's racism. That's what
Exactly.
racism is.
Yeah,
You know?
no. And everything you just said, like that's the reason, that's one of the main reasons why I am not a third wave feminist. I cannot, I don't say I'm an intersectionalist. I go out of my way to
Yeah.
separate myself from that.
I have never called myself an intersectional feminist either. I don't even know what that means. Like
I
I
know.
understand it, like, but then it just sounds so stupid because you're basically saying you're an intersectional feminist. That means you're going to justify certain abuses that women face at certain intersections. That is so
It's,
stupid.
to me, I see them the other half, and I was talking to Andy O'Brien about this. The other half of the cray
Oh,
cray
Andy
coin,
here. Yeah.
the other half, you've got the like you were talking about what I call neo-misogyny, like
Yeah.
misogyny. Sorry, the MRAs. You have them, and then you have these crazy, weird third wave intersectional feminists, and they're two sides of that coin, and they. My mother would say extremes will get you killed and they're going to kill us all because they don't seem to have any legitimate points. All they want to do is bitch, moan, hate.
Yeah.
And uh, that's one thing that really bothers me about the internet. The internet's great and wonderful, and I love social media. It's how I found my best friends in France. But I do see the internet also as kind of propping up those people, which everyone gets a platform on the internet, so that's their platform. But most people here in Alabama, if I mention like intersectionalism or MRA, they don't know what the hell I'm talking about.
The internet, as you said, it's a great platform. It gives a lot of voice to the people who, they can have like instant access to a platform just
Mhm.
by doing a Google Hangout or writing a blog or posting videos on YouTube or going on social media, Facebook and Twitter, Instagram, whatever, right? But it also attracts a lot of crazies, you know. And
Oh, it does.
that's the problem. You know, there's so many people who are so bored. I call them keyboard activists, you know.
Yeah.
they just they just go through their Twitter feed or their Facebook
Yeah.
feed and they're like, "Oh my god, that's so offensive. I don't know the context. I don't know the story. I don't know anything about this, but I'm just going to look at it and outrage. I'm going to go on like complete outrage mode because it's offensive because the article says it's offensive and it has like this black and white narrative and I'm just going to believe it. I'm not going to question it. I'm not going to check for
Mhm.
the veracity of the claims it's made.
Mhm.
I'm just going to outrage. They're keyboard activists. That's what
Yeah.
they are. But then they
Yeah.
like to pretend that they care for human rights
Mhm.
without they won't even bother to do all these they won't even investigate into the stories that are being reported.
Mhm.
And they also many of them are also conspiracy theorists.
I
And
know. What is up with that? There's like a lot of that online. Like everyone has a
Illuminati, like I
conspiracy.
hope they like my earrings because it has like a triangle. Can you see it? You know,
Illuminati.
I really hope that somebody sees me and they're like, oh my god, she's wearing like these triangle shaped earrings, like she must be with the Illuminati. Like I get called Mossad. Like imagine,
Really?
like I get called Mossad. Yeah, and I also got called an Indian raw Hindu agent. I'm an
Hmm.
atheist, but like I'm still a Hindu agent apparently. Like
Wow. Well, the triangle is that in magic. I used to
yeah.
practice that's an element sign. I think it's either air or fire. It's an element sign, and it's also feminine, like a triad. So there's a lot of conspiracy mysticism with that. So there you go, guys, run with it. Yeah.
so much there's so much like innocuous things that people want to turn into a big problem.
Hmm.
They're so
Yeah.
melodramatic at the end of the day. That's what they are. They have no lives and the only thing that they can go to is their keyboards and outrage,
Yeah.
cyber outrage.
Yeah.
And that's all that their activism consists of, just outrage, like type, BDS, BDS, like Israel doesn't have the right to exist, BDS, boycott, what was it, boycott, divestment and sanctions. uh
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's what it is. and put a lot of Palestinians out of jobs, because that's what's happening with BDS. A lot of Palestinians are being laid off, and they're not. Um, they're the Palestinians
Hmm.
in West Bank. They are basically out of jobs now because of the BDS movement. And these people who encourage BDS really don't seem to understand the reality, because
Yes.
now these families will not be able to have an income. They are poor. They are not going to be able to feed their families or pay rent or whatever, and medicine. They're not going to be able to have a good, properly have healthcare as well. So they basically just doomed these Palestinians whom they claim to adore, all because they have like this extreme anti-Jew sentiment. And
Mm-hmm.
to me, when I look at BDS, that's what I look at it as. It's anti-Jewish,
Yeah.
and we can always talk about Israel and its its settlement policy and how it makes illegal settlement, but I'm not going to look at a Jewish business and immediately boycott it because it's Jewish. Because
Yeah.
that's what anti-Semitism is. You discriminate them and you abuse them because they are of that identity, and people don't see their own hypocrisy, their own moral hypocrisy. They have one set of morals for themselves,
Mhm.
but then a completely different set of morals for other people. And that's
That's
moral
yeah.
hypocrisy, and people need
Yeah.
to not be a moral hypocrite.
So we're very disconnected in the West. I think like those of us living in our bubbles, how do we, in the age of the internet, you think people would understand like everything you just said? You think would make sense? How do we get across to people that they're still in a bubble?
The problem with the Western world is, now, okay, I'll have to start off with the story of the East. Now, the East has been plagued by wars and caste system and racism and sexism, and it's not really, it's moving very slowly into progression. It's
Hmm.
and in some places it's like a stalemate. It's not even progressing or regressing. It's just like nobody people are dying and their people are feeling hopeless. So a lot of the Easterners who flee to the West, we know that the West has progressed socially to a
Hmm.
certain level, and also governments are not fascists as the ones that are in the East. So when we flee to the West, we know that we will be safe, and we know the reality. We are completely connected to the reality in the East. But then people who live in the West, they have not experienced war on their home soil. They have not experienced any external um, problems, and to them it has become a bubble of privilege,
Hmm.
and so for them it's very difficult to relate. And the moment that people stop relating to other human beings, they tend to kind of like overlook the struggles, because they can't understand if they cannot relate. And that's the reason why people who are coming into the West from the East need to be given a platform and express themselves, because this is the reality. That's the reason why I fully support people like Ayan Hirsi Ali.
Oh yeah.
Like I don't agree with 100% of what she says, but I definitely support her having a platform and having to expose Islamism for what it actually is, because she knows what she's talking about.
Exactly. Yeah.
She has the experience, and she basically is an expert. Before I came here, I was going through my phone a couple of hours ago, I think. My last tweet, whenever that was. I looked through, and someone said, "Oh, like why are all these anti-Islam Muslims being considered experts on Islam?" And I'm like, excuse me, but okay, first of all, Ayan Hirsi Ali, she's an ex-Muslim and she's an atheist, so she's not a
Hmm.
Muslim,
Yeah.
and she's anti-Islam for a very good reason. She survived FGM. She
Hmm.
survived forced arranged marriage. She literally had to flee to avoid having been forced to marry her own cousin. And I'm also reading one of her books called Infidel, and I'm only like a few pages in. I'm almost into chapter 2 now, and it has really good insight um, onto her expertise, like what she grew up with, the the society that has molded her to be who
Mm.
she is today, and why um, the immediate culture that she grew up in is what's reflecting her expertise, you know. And a lot of people want to discredit her and say that, oh, she's just an anti-Muslim bigot, blah blah blah. It's so much easier for people to say that and to label her an anti-Muslim bigot without ever having to acknowledge and understand what she, as a Muslim woman, had to go through, as a
Hmm.
Muslim girl growing up to become a Muslim woman who has been tortured and abused,
Yeah.
and she literally has to flee to protect her rights when nobody else came to her defense. The society was all for that kind of practice, for that kind of violence and abuse against women and girls. And now that she's here in the West and she's getting support, now she's suddenly like, she's a traitor, she's a native informant. That's what people call her, because she's an ex-Muslim and she's being vocal about her abuse. How dare she, how dare she, how dare she say that she's a
Yeah.
human being and deserves dignity and rights?
And see, I think that regressive left stance is very racist. I think it's
It is.
patronizing, it's condescending, it's racist,
Yes,
and I think it's ugly.
yes, it is. It's incredibly ugly. And the people who will always defend that kind of ugliness, they are the people who are first of all, they are always moral hypocrites. They want the West to treat them with respect. They want Islam to receive respect, even though it does not. No religion deserves respect.
Yeah, true that.
It's misogynistic. It's sexist, homophobic, anti-Jew, um, and it's racist. I mean, the kind of crap that it says about the Jews and black people. I mean, oh, like I don't even understand why there are black people who are Muslims, because that's like a completely different another story. Maybe
Yeah.
if we have time we can get back to it. But um, so no, but then they want Islam to be respected. But then at the same time, if you question all its inconsistencies, its contradictions, its ugliness, then they become offended. They're like, "Oh, these are our sentiments. Like, how dare you hurt our sentiments?" Like, as if like your sentiments mean anything. It doesn't matter if you're offended. If you're offended, then it's on you. You chose to perceive it as an insult. You know,
Yes.
but 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 then because they cannot give a coherent response to having their religion challenged, because they know it's a contradiction. They just don't want to admit it out loud, because then they will become the butt of the joke, you know
Hmm.
and they don't want to get to that, so they will constantly deflect, and they will also deter the conversation by saying, oh my god, this is hatred, this is hate speech. But then in the back of their mind, they're saying it's completely okay for me to worship something as ugly as that. I want the right to worship something misogynistic, homophobic, racist, and hateful and violent, but you cannot challenge all that which I worship, even though it infringes on the fundamental human rights of every single human being.
Hmm.
So it's hypocrisy. It's moral hypocrisy at its peak. And
Yeah.
and 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 if you keep going, if you keep challenging it, the jihadis and the Islamists, they will resort to violence. They will physically shut you up, and that's the kind of violence that women face when they
Yes.
question their abusive husband. They get slapped around. When a woman
Hmm.
says no, like on the street, she's walking and a guy touches her inappropriately, grabbing her breast or the backside, and she says no, stop. Then suddenly like she's a bitch and she's overreacting.
Yeah,
And then
exactly.
some of them even resort to violence by punching them, like not knocking them out cold or throwing beer bottles at them. It's ridiculous. Oh, and another thing, for every single person who says, West doesn't need feminism anymore, um, I have a huge issue with them. But again, we'll bank that and get back to that. But
Yeah, no.
so so it's it's unbelievable as to how far people will go to defend the ugliness of ideologies
Hmm.
and just the everyday behavior, because it's convenient for them to not examine it. It's convenient for them to not critically think about it.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah,
very convenient, and it's basically a defense of tribalism. You know,
I agree.
they
Yeah.
want to defend their tribe at all cost, at any and all cost. They don't care if the cost is human rights, people's lives. They just don't care. They want their tribes to be protected,
Hmm.
and protected, and not even protected. It's not even about protection, because protection would mean that the tribe is being attacked. They're not being
Yeah.
attacked. They don't want to be challenged. So basically, they are dictating. They are dictators, and they are fascists. That's what they are. They are totalitarians. They do not want any outside influence. They do not want to have anybody else um, they do not want anybody getting in their way of their totalitarianism. That's the bottom line, and that really upsets them when it becomes challenged.
Yeah, and I agree. And it's talking about what you just mentioned about you said that the people argue that the West, that we don't need feminism, like it's suddenly not needed here, when it was only in 1920 that American women got the right to vote. It hasn't even been 100 years yet.
Yeah,
People forget that
yeah,
because it's convenient to forget that.
exactly.
It really makes me cringe when people say that, because I live in Alabama, and I pulled up a bunch of articles and stats on the U.S. maternal mortality rate, and a lot of those states are southern states, and I'm sitting in one of them. And I know the reasons. I know the social reasons why it's a thing. Why that's it's a danger here, and it is a threat. Is because of that whole notion that women are second class citizens at best, and you see it in every religion. You see it in Catholicism, like the Southern Catholics, and you see it in the Southern Baptist, where there's that notion of like the good little wife, and just a lot of weird crap. Pentecostals, the people who handle snakes. I don't even know if anyone out there, even if you're familiar with Pentecostals, but you may want to look into that. They're an hour north on Sand Mountain. I'm sitting
I've
right in
heard
the
of
middle of all
them.
this shit.
I've heard of them, but I'm not too familiar with them.
Oh, they are some scary mofos. I tell you what, they are scary. They are scary. I have family that married into that, and they literally like handle snakes. Like that's how they
Wow.
prove it. It's a weird form of American Protestantism or whatever, where
Are
they
the snakes supposed to bite them and or
yeah, like
survive it? Like,
exactly. If they survive it, then God protected them. It's just very, very weird. In fact, about 10 years ago, there was a preacher that actually got his wife killed because he stuck her hand like in the snake cage, and just bad. And of course, these are rattlesnakes, by the way, in case you're
oh,
wondering what kind of snakes. These are rattlesnakes, y'all. And those things can leap. So it's very dangerous. And that's just one little that's just one little piece of what I see around here, or what's around here. I mean, I don't personally see it because I stay away from people like that. But
mhm,
I had two girlfriends that came from the East. One moved from Bangladesh and the other from Pakistan. And moving here to Alabama, you don't notice a lot like when you're like in the city, like maybe
mhm.
Huntsville. Huntsville, we have the Space and Rocket Center in Huntsville. So it's very first world, right? Very, very normal shopping malls, all that jazz. Here in Birmingham, we got the summit. We still got some problems in Birmingham. Remember what happened when Trump came to town? They attacked the Black Lives Matter activists. Don't forget that. So Birmingham, we still have problems. But when my two girlfriends moved here, they each said something really interesting. They're like, there are parts of the South that are very second world,
Mhm.
because we see a lot of the same stuff. It's just a Western version of it.
Mhm.
And Shiro's in particular told me, she's like, Amber, it would scare you, you being the way you are, if you knew how similar, how precarious. Like suddenly if the Confederacy was to rise again and break away, not that that's going to happen. I hope that never happens. But That is scary. It is still an American culture. That's still very much the way that it is in American culture. And I don't think people realize that, because the South is so different. And even talking to me, like guys from other parts of the country, they're like, we didn't even realize all that stuff was a thing. Like, it goes on.
Yeah. And not a lot of people. Oh, West doesn't need feminism, because I believe, I'm not sure if the numbers have been updated or not, but the last time I checked, 31 out of the 50 states still gave parental rights
Yes,
to rapists.
correct. Yeah, no,
So
that's correct.
so a rapist who, by the way, I saw this story once on the news. Um, a man who was serving time in prison for raping a woman was given the right to
Hmm.
see the child born of that rape.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
every single time the woman, um, refused to cooperate, she was going in contempt of the court order, the access order. She was put in jail
Hmm.
because apparently the rapist has parental rights to that
Yeah.
child born of rape, and she is supposed to take her child to visit his
Hmm.
rapist father in
Hmm.
prison. They will
It's
have a
messed up.
one-on-one, and I'm just like, that is rape culture right there. If
It
over
is,
half
yeah.
the state is saying a rapist can sue their rape victims for custody and access, then that is rape culture. I mean, what else is a rape culture? Come on, you're going to give
Yeah.
rights to a rapist when it comes to the
Yeah.
children. You're saying that rape victims must cooperate with their rapist. That
Yeah.
is rape culture. It's when you devalue the life of a rape victim. That is what rape culture is. And
Exactly.
then you
And
give
I think
power to the
Tennessee,
rapist.
yeah, Tennessee, my other state is one of those states.
Hmm.
Um, and it's interesting because a lot of these southern states are the ones that are also like trying to even restrict not just abortion, but access to birth control for
Yep.
young girls.
And that's the reason
Um,
why teenage pregnancy
mhm.
is really high up in the southern states
Oh yeah.
than anywhere else.
Not only that, but for instance, in Mississippi, it's illegal for a teacher to teach sex education. It is illegal. I know, at least in Mississippi, that's the state over from me. And I think they may have one abortion clinic left, one women's health clinic. Um, Now, Alabama basically ties in third for one of the most, I believe, restrictive states on abortion laws. We still have a couple of clinics, and if you guys saw John Oliver last week, you know what's going on with the one where they're talking about they're trying to do lots of things that are okay. Our state Supreme Court, Roy Moore is still here, y'all. Everyone knows who Roy Moore is, right? The whole gay marriage thing, Roy Moore. He's also the one who kept that statue on public land that was really it was the Ten Commandments from the movie Moses, and he had it on the state capitol, and the Supreme Court, I think, had to tell him twice to remove it. This has been over 10 years ago. But every judge that sits on our Supreme Court is Republican. And it's really hard to be a Democrat. It's like coming out gay or something in this state to be a Democrat. And I know that firsthand because I'm a delegate for Bernie. And it's just really
Yeah, I
difficult.
see that Bernie 2016.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mailed Andy a bunch of them. He wanted some over there, so I mailed them. Yeah, but it's just amazing, like how people are so blinded to the way things are here, and even Southerners that sort of live in their bubble, and they just don't want to fight that. For instance, what you said about 31 states and the whole rape thing, the whole rape culture. And this is one thing that really irks me about intersectionalism. Why are they not, if they want to talk about rape culture, why are they not talking about that?
yep. But instead, they're talking about Shirtgate and Sansa Stark, a fictional character being raped on screen.
Oh,
But they will
I
never
know.
mention. They will never. I have never actually seen a prominent Western feminist talking about this.
See, that's scary.
That's
Yeah,
scary. It's concerning. As a feminist, it's like, why are you not talking about it? Like, women are being asked to cooperate with their rapists. How could you not
exactly.
step up and defend their rights?
I've known women who have been in situations like that. I mean, it's one of my good friends right now. I was checking my phone on office because she's actually getting out of a really bad relationship, and I was on the phone with her all this morning because the first thing he was moving out was his gun collection.
Mm,
And I said, have your dad there, please get someone over there, because he didn't want anyone at the house.
yep.
And, that's a first thing that went through, because if you've ever had a gun stuck in your face, which I have, when someone says he's moving out his gun collection, you know exactly what goes through your head.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was on the phone with her this morning, and she couldn't talk, so I just had to text because, she had to keep an eye on him.
Yeah.
I mean, this kind of shit happens all the time.
All the time, yep. And also in the United States, a woman's chance of becoming killed in a
Mm-hmm.
domestic violence situation with a man is increased by 500% with a gun in the house. Even if
Mm-hmm.
the gun is hers,
Yeah,
right?
even if it's her
That's
gun.
all he has to do is like subdue her because mostly men are more muscular and
Mm-hmm.
stronger than a woman. He can easily overpower her, go for the gun, and fire on her. And that's how most of the women in domestic violence situations die in
Yeah,
the
that's
United
true.
States
Mm-hmm.
by having a gun fired at them. And majority
Mm-hmm.
of the times, it's always their male spouse.
Mm-hmm.
But West
Yeah,
doesn't need
yeah.
feminism, I'm told. I'm told West does not need feminism because, like, we got the right to vote. So, woohoo, that's the end of it, right?
Yeah, I know, and they and actually you mentioned something, the whole physical difference between men and women, like men being just physically stronger, and there are definite biological, scientific, natural physical differences, and that's
Yep.
that's one reason why I'm really hesitant to use like the word egalitarian or
Mm-hmm.
or equal, because I know that we're not physically, and I know that firsthand that we're not, and that's in I don't hopefully one day in the future, when women's rights are really truly globally recognized as human rights, we can say feminism was a great historical movement. But until then,
Exactly.
until where I'm living, where domestic violence isn't the norm, because I'm sitting here telling you, you can even look it up on our state boards and shit, and online at our stats, looking at the Alabama State Police Department reports on domestic violence. It's really scary. It is a problem in the South. This is still a really big problem in the South, and it's because the culture here is very primitive.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like Shiro said. She's like, Amber, it would scare you if you knew how similar that in some very instances it actually is, even though it's not, you don't immediately see it, like you're not wearing the same dress, you don't see women veiling or anything like that. But when you go into the homes and you look at the undercurrent, you see the same issues that haunt the South.
Mm-hmm.
But
And
yeah, so that's always I've always been very aware of that, and it's interesting because when I see intersectionalists or third wavers online and I see them, and I've done this, and I had a friend of mine, Reese, in the H&H cast, he comes on occasionally, but I we got I liked this Facebook page, and it was Women Without Religion. It was an open page, it wasn't a group, it wasn't a private group, and I just liked it. I thought, well, that would be cool because I'm an atheist in the South, and I know I'm in a minority because I'm female, and I'm actually brave enough to come out.
I hope they don't know you because that'll be very problematic.
But so I like this page, and they were posting a bunch of stuff I didn't agree with. So they were put like Shirtgate. I forget what it was. It was something. Maybe it was something about Richard Dawkins. It was something about Dawkins, or something about Gamergate, or something bizarre. And it was several weird posts that they did over a couple days. And so what I did, I said, not they made a statement about anyone who's an intersectionalist doesn't need to be on here. I'm like, well, not every, there's more than one type of feminist. And I consider myself more of a classical feminist because I would say I'm more second wave because I don't embrace the third wave, like the hypocrisy, the moral hypocrisy that you talked about, and the ignoring and the ugly ignoring of what's happening to women
Mm-hmm.
over in the East and Africa and all that. And not just that, but this denial of what's going on in our own country, like laws we still need to get changed.
Yeah.
And I made those points, and I'm like, look, if any of you guys really want to help me right now in my state, and I know those of you who watch this have seen me harp about this. Yes, and this comes on the back of like abortion clinics and birth control being denied to people, adoption trafficking.
Yeah.
And yes, there are forced adoptions just like the mid-century happening right now. And I told these intersectionalists about this. I'm like, here's the information. Please check out the Bring Baby Elliot homepage. If you really want something to do, I would really appreciate your help. And they kicked me and Reese off their page. They totally like blocked us. So then I went on Twitter and I tweeted a bunch of their shit out, and everyone got on them about it. But yeah, it's just amazing that they don't really care about what's going on here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get it.
Just going back a little to your comment about the the physical differences, the biological differences between women and men. And also when it comes to abortion, now a lot of people say, like abortion, it's so immoral, it's killing babies, blah blah blah, women are murderers and all that, and all that good stuff, right? Anything to demonize a woman, they will associate that with them having an abortion or having abortion rights. Now, people often fail to see that when it comes to dehumanizing women, they do not see the consequences of pregnancy and childbirth.
Hmm.
For a woman, because we have a uterus and we are predisposed, biologically predisposed to having that burden of pregnancy, um, we should also have the right to terminate it because it is the biological reaction when
Hmm.
a sperm goes and finds the egg, right?
Yeah.
If we don't want that fertilized egg to grow, we should have the right to get rid of it. You know, just as it came in, we have every right to kick it out. And that is our biology. It's inherent to our biology. Come on,
Hmm.
I mean that's like the fundamental factors of what rights are based on. You know,
Hmm.
imagine if someone says, "Oh no, 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 please, please, you cannot have chemotherapy because that's
Yeah.
immoral," because that's just something natural occurrence in your body, and you should just let the disease grow. Like, how dare you kill it? You know. And then they're like, "Oh well, like babies, they're not a disease. They're babies, they're humans." And I'm like, "Yeah, but they're still a fetus, you know." And if a woman does not want a fetus growing in her, now that we're into 2016, she has every right to get rid of it. And then some people are like, well, then there's so many women who just like never use protection and that they keep going having abortions and they should be prevented from having so much abortions. And I'm like, so you're telling me that a woman, and by the way, um, pregnancy prevention, it's not just up to the woman. The man who sticks it in also has to use protection.
Yeah.
If he's not responsible enough to do that, then it's on him as well, not just the women. But of course, the burden goes on to the women, So, because it is her body at the end of the day. So, if she wants to have an abortion, she can have an abortion. And I'm not going to force a person who refuses to use protection, any kind of contraception, to avoid pregnancy and punish her with a baby because, like, you know, what she's doing is wrong. Having so much abortions is wrong. First of all, it's not your body. Second of all, I'm not going to punish the baby by making her have a baby,
Hmm.
a baby she clearly does not want to have because she constantly has an abortion, right?
Yeah.
So people don't understand that that this kind of primitive um, primitive concepts of punishment is is fair. Like they actually think it's perfectly fine to punish a woman by forcing her to have a child because apparently
Hmm.
she should never have had sex in the first place. Well, then a man should
Yeah.
never have had sex with her in the first place because without his sperm, she would not be pregnant today, right? But nobody talks about that. Nobody ever talks about what the man did, about his responsibility. If he does not want to impregnate a woman, then he should make sure that he is using a condom. End of the story.
Hmm.
End of story. You know, if you're gonna put all the blame on women, no, it's not. It doesn't work that way because the men is the man is half responsible for a pregnancy. He shares half the blame. So unless he actually wants to have a child with that woman, I don't understand why he's not using plastic. So
Yeah.
men,
So that's
if you don't use plastic, guess what? You are you have half of the responsibility. So remember, plastic, or you face my wrath. Okay.
that's funny. Yeah.
Feminism, it's equality. You
Yeah.
baby, we are not Virgin Marys, or we do not have immaculate conception.
Yeah.
Men, you know, even I still think that the Virgin Mary, she was most likely raped by some
Yeah.
perv, and and
Hmm.
and because during that time the whole fetishization of virginity, which is still
Hmm.
happening today. But anyways, to avoid being, the family honor, shamed and blah blah blah, they said, look, immaculate conception, and ta-da, like baby Jesus was born. And there's also this whole situation with the Egyptian pagan mythology,
Oh yeah.
where like I think two Egyptian mythologies um, hinted
Horus was a immaculate conception.
and the other was I think it was a Greek mythology, maybe
Mhm.
Mithras.
Athena sprung out of Zeus's head. That was a male immaculate conception.
But like these are like stories being repeated, and it's almost like a broken telephone too, because
Mhm.
history is a long time, and people tend to change the story from over the time, and it
Yeah.
ends up now we ended up with baby Jesus, and people apparently thought it's true and started worshiping it, you know,
Hmm.
and and then meanwhile,
Yeah.
at the same time, they tell you pagans, heathens, they are heathens, and you should not, those are false gods.
Yeah. I
Even though
mean,
baby
shoot.
Jesus is a pagan mythology.
Yeah, he for real. I mean, Christianity is so pagan. It is so pagan. I know I'm a former pagan, y'all. So it is very, and I was raised Catholic. So
Oh, okay. That's a great combination right there.
yeah, it was an easy transfer, from one to the other, and then practicing goetic witchcraft. I mean, it's all about demons anyway. So smooth sailing. Yeah. I've seen some weird shit and have some weird stories, but what you said is interesting about the whole like abortion thing, like thinking it's a baby and it's sacred when it's still just a collection of cells. It's a blastocyst,
Exactly.
and then it goes into the embryonic stage and all that. Not only are they not educated into the stages of pregnancy and gestation and all that jazz, but they don't realize, especially Protestants, exactly how much the Catholic Church still has on them, how deeply ingrained their beliefs are truly Catholic. And that would offend a lot of Protestants if they realized it. But for instance, it was St. Augustine and Galen and a lot of the church fathers that came up with that whole notion that the soul is transferred via the male sperm. And that's the root and the heart of thinking that a collection of cells up in someone's uterus that's a few days old is a soul, is because it comes from, again, that dogmatic mythology.
Mm-hmm.
And if people knew that, if they were to trace it back and look at it, and I know that because I was raised Catholic, I went to Catholic school, they may change their viewpoint. So a lot of it is a matter of education. Not only are they not getting human anatomy and biology and sex education down here or anywhere that's more provincial. I'll be nice to say provincial.
Precisely the reason why many of the religious people oppose teaching evolution and anything related
Hmm.
to science. They want their children to continue to grow up being indoctrinated by their religious, nonsense. They, as soon as it comes to having sex education, they like they get scared because they know that once their children are educated, they will be armed with facts and they will know to use protection, and they know that they could actually do this, and then certain thoughts would spring into their minds because they're still developing, right? They're children, and they would start to wonder, wait a minute, if this is what sex is, if this is what sexuality is, then how could what my religion says be real?
Hmm.
They're going to start questioning, and the religious zealots, they do not want that happening, and they will start to oppose it, and this happens mainly with Catholics and Muslims, and especially here in Toronto. That's how I see it. Many of the Catholics and many of the Muslims, they oppose sex education, especially for younger children.
Yeah.
Like, oh, like they're going to last summer. Um, our province was considering giving sex education to younger children in elementary level, and now some people exaggerated what that actually meant, and they said, "Oh, they're going to teach our fourth and fifth grade children to use a cucumber to masturbate," and I'm like,
Ew.
what?
No.
What? Like, where did you get all this information from? And they're like passing out these pamphlets with all these like bullshit, like one bullshit after the next. And I'm like, no, they're not going to teach children to use a cucumber and a banana. Like, what? Like, are you out of your mind?
Wow.
Like, where? And apparently, a local imam gave out that pamphlet.
Okay.
And I'm like, okay, so there you go. These people are vicious. They are vicious, and they often come veiled as these pious,
Hmm.
moral, religious leaders. and they're basically just selling people bullshit, and people believe it.
Yeah. Yeah. And, they come up with the weirdest, most perverse ideas, like the whole cucumber. Like, who the hell would think of that?
Yep.
I mean, who thinks of it's always the religious people that do pass it off like, oh, I'm so pious. They always think of like the weirdest, creepiest shit.
Yeah.
It's
They say that
bizarre.
the sex is so your sexuality is such a sin, and
Yeah,
like meanwhile, how many little boys have the Catholic priests raped?
exactly.
how how much of them, how much of these pedophiles did the Vatican defend?
Hmm.
How much money did they give to these child rapists and have them defended in the name of, in the name of the Vatican? They defended child rapists, all these pedophiles. They just like moved them around from
Hmm.
one country to the next,
Yep,
one church to the next, and then created more victims, thousands, tens of thousands of victims,
exactly.
and all for what? Because it's somehow sinful to talk about it. That somehow the rapes didn't happen because they are men of messengers of God. Like what in the actual fuck? Like it doesn't even make any sense.
And see, I was actually called, okay, and I've said this before on here, and I'm trying to get the records from the Coleman County Courthouse Police Station. But when I was in high school here in Coleman, Alabama, before I went to college, I went back to Tennessee and started college early after my sophomore year. So when I would have been a junior, I actually started college. Now, one of the reasons I left high school early and started college early is because the high school that I was enrolled in, St. Bernard Preparatory in Coleman, Alabama, was basically busted for child molestation charges and allegations. And I was one of the 12 students that I was taken by the police department and DHR in from school for questioning because I was witness or witness by ear, not sight, to a lot of what was going on. And to this day, everything that happened that I know about has been swept under the rug. And I'm trying to get my former classmates to come out and speak about this. And this was in the late 90s, and they still will not acknowledge it. And people that I care about dearly, they still will not acknowledge that it happened. And they're on Facebook with me, and I've commented about it. And so I'm going to end up getting one of my podcast buddies to do a program or a little vlog, whatever podcast on here about what happened, because it's amazing. And those one of the monks, he's still there. He's still around young girls and boys today, to this day.
And because nothing is being done, he's most likely creating a lot more victims now,
Hmm.
and they are too scared to come forward. And that's
Hmm.
usually how it goes when something happens, when a serial sex abuser is ousted and authority doesn't do anything about it. People would know that this person is now untouchable. Like they will not be able to do anything about him because he gotten away. What's stopping him from getting away now? And at
Hmm.
the end of the day, the only thing that the victims would have is a humiliation.
Hmm.
and and not just humiliation. Society will spit on them, hate them, ostracize them, and they would call them liars. And when a person survives sex abuse, the worst thing to hear is when we are told that we are liars,
Hmm.
especially from the immediate society, the
Oh
immediate
yeah.
family, friends. And many of the friends would be like, "Oh, look, I don't want to talk about it because I don't want
Hmm.
to, have any sad thoughts." And basically, that's what happened to me one time. Like the first time that I talked about um, my as a child, I was abused, and the first person that I said this to was a close friend of mine, and she immediately like shut down and said, like, I don't want to talk about it because I don't want to have any sad thoughts. And so then I was just like, okay, so if I can't even open up to her, there's no way that I can open up to anybody else.
Hmm.
So, and then also, I'm South Asian. Now, my friend was Canadian, She wasn't even South Asian. But my family, we are South Asian, and we have like this, like the way I was brought up, it consisted of things like, valuing things based on my gender. Like a girl is supposed to not be like that. And
Mhm.
even like the movies that I grew up watching, like all the dumbass Tamil movies, it's like where a girl gets raped and she is forced to marry her rapist, and
Mhm.
they live happily ever after. Like, what the fuck,
Yeah.
right? and then and then a husband who, by the way, is like a hero. He's like the main character of a movie, and this is how typical most South Asian films are. He's a hero. He gets angry, slaps his wife, and the wife is like begging him for forgiveness. I'm
Mhm.
like, what? Like, what the fuck? Like, he just beat her, and somehow, like, over like an actual disagreement, he will hit her. Apparently, she said something inappropriate or whatever in the movie, and he didn't like it. So he would raise his hand and just slap her across the face, and she falls on the floor crying. And then she crawls back up to him, and she's like begging him for forgiveness. And this is the kind of crap that girls are brought up in, Like,
Yeah.
this is what's expected of actual South Asian girls. And nobody ever tells you that this is actually just fiction. But the thing is, though, it reflects the reality of that
Mhm.
culture, of the South Asian culture, and nobody questions it. Nobody stops to say, you know what, like a husband should never treat you like that,
Yeah.
you know? And not just like movies, just like just basically everything from the way my father treated my mom, and everybody else, my relatives, my cousins, my aunts, uncles, whatever, the list just keeps going on and on and on. Nobody ever said that this kind of behavior is wrong. But
Mhm.
you grow up in this atmosphere that it's okay for people to do shit like that to you. It's okay, and you should never talk about it because it's shameful, and it becomes so exhausting just thinking about it. So for me, up until I was 19, I always kind of kept all of the abuses at the back of my head. And now I was abused as a child back in Sri Lanka, where I was born and raised. And I was also abused here in Canada. And all those things I just had to keep at the back of my head. And I could never talk. Like, it was suffocating. And it put me like in a lot of bad places, and it took me to a lot of bad places. It didn't just put me in a bad place, it took me
Mhm.
to bad places as well. And I got into a lot of trouble because of that. I got into a lot of personal um, conflicts with families and friends, and even intimate partners. And it just boiled over to the point where by the time I understood that, I need to actually talk about it, like I had like this big, huge breakdown. I think I was maybe 19, almost 20 at that time. And but then the thing though was I was always strong-willed. Like I was never, um, even though I suffered, I kind of used that to empower myself. I never like completely let go of myself. So there was like always this voice in the back of my head that said, like I should keep strong. If I break down and lose my mind, I would I would lose. Like I'm basically defining my life based on these piece of shits that um that hurt me.
Mhm.
And they will have the satisfaction that they did this to me. So I'm going to keep living my life. I'm going to keep growing. I'm going to keep learning. If I need to cry, I will have a timeout and I will cry. But I'm going to keep going. And that's the thing that, you know, kept me alive all this time. And the older I got, the older I was able to talk about this with other people. And the more I talked about it with other people, the more free I became, because I no longer feel shame for what happened. I no longer feel that it's my shame and my blame, you
Mhm.
know. Um, so the more openly I talked about it, the more I felt empowered. The more I felt that This was not my fault. And I'm going to talk about this because it should never happen to another human being. It should never happen to another woman, man, a boy, or a girl, you know? And every single time shit like this happens, it needs to be pointed out. And people need to be empowered to speak out
Yeah.
without having all these cultural um, conflictions stopping them from saying what they need to say to move on. Because if you don't say it out loud, if you do not expose yourself, you are going to like basically like implode.
Hmm.
And once you implode, it's game over. Because then at that point, it's going to be very difficult to pick yourself up. Because basically, I did implode, but then, you know, I was, I don't know what caused me to pick myself up because I was always a bit of a black sheep growing up. Even back in Sri Lanka, I always questioned all the cultural BS, and I used to get my ears twisted for it. People
Oh,
would tell
goodness.
me like, "Oh, you're a girl. You talk too much." Like my aunt would constantly tell me, "Stop climbing that tree." Like, and I'm like, "Why can't I climb the tree?" "Oh, cause you're a girl." And I'm like, "But my three brothers are up there. Why can't I climb the tree too? I have two hands. I have two legs. Why can't I do that?" My aunt would be like, "Oh, um, it's because you're a girl and it's very immodest." And I'm like, that makes no sense. I mean, I was 4 years old, so I don't know what modesty was. I didn't know any of that crap. So I'm like, I don't, that makes no sense. And she's like, "Oh, you just talk too much for a girl." And they would like twist my, that's how the conversations always ended. Every single time I did something that my brothers did, I would constantly get told that my sex was the issue, and because of my sex, I should not be doing what my brothers are doing. Just like playing games, like climbing the fucking tree, like the
Hmm.
guava tree or the mango tree. Like, I'm not supposed to climb the mango tree because I'm a girl. That
Hmm.
doesn't even make any sense, right? So I've always kind of been rebellious in that kind of sense, and I kind of carried that with me throughout my childhood, even through the abuses. It was frightening, of course, but then it's still in the back of your head. You still use logic to
Hmm.
process what's happening. So that's how every child knows that what's happening to them is wrong, but they just don't know how to express it because they don't know what sex abuse is. Nobody tells them, especially in my culture. Nobody ever tells a child that a stranger should not be touching you there. Down there, they should not be playing with you down there. They should not be doing anything to you down there because they are strangers. And even relatives, like most of the children who are being abused, they're abused by
Yeah.
relatives and friends and family. you know so nobody ever tells children, so the children think it's okay, that it's normal. My abusers told me that I should never tell my family. If I ever tell my mom, then I'm going to get in trouble. And when an adult says that to a child, the child believes that adult. And
Hmm.
that's how sadistic these people are. And that's how you know that rape culture exists regardless of where you are, whether it's the West or the East. Because when thousands of children are being raped and molested here in Canada, please don't tell me that rape culture does not exist in Canada or in the United States or the UK. You're trying to tell me that children don't get molested on a daily basis? Are you telling me that children don't get raped on a daily basis? Just
Hmm.
because you're ignorant to it does not mean that it does not exist. Your ignorance is not is not evident of something not existing, because that's the
Yeah.
whole concept of ignorance. You do not know what's happening. Therefore, you cannot use that to
Yeah.
say to that that something doesn't exist. Because if this was a court trial, you would fail. You would fail immensely because you're saying that because you didn't know that it wasn't a crime. And people get
Yeah.
up on this every single day and night. They need to finally, you can try to tell people, you can educate them, you can arm them with all these information, you can give them statistics, you can give them tell them you can even tell them that please just go to a local women's shelter, get the information from the counselors.
Hmm.
Oh, that's like, and then they won't even bother to do that. They won't even bother to go down to a local court to get a transcript of whatever rape case that came that day, or even like an yearly, here in Toronto, you can actually go to the Crown's website, and now Crown is the DA equivalent of the states. So the Crown, the prosecutors, that's what they are. So when you go to the prosecutor's office, you can actually get all these information. Like even on their website, you can get it. There's like a link to all these government statistics, and you can just easily pull up all these information. And every single time I go on Twitter, what do I see people asking me? They want me to explain an year's worth of statistics in 140 characters.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, oh, please give me a link. And then I'm like, you know what? Why don't you go look it up yourself?
Yeah.
You have Google. Please look it up.
Mm-hmm.
Don't tell me that you cannot pull this information out.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like Christina Sommer said, she's like busting a myth. Oh, that's what they called it, busting a myth. Earlier, I was talking about the term. Yeah, Christina Sommer, she loves to bust myth. The myth of rape culture, the myth of violence against.
Who the fuck? Wait. Is she like Rebecca Watson?
I'm not
too?
sure Rebecca Watson.
Yeah.
She's Christina Sommer, Christina Hoff Sommers. Like, she's like greatly appreciated by the dude bro community. The dude bros, like they always go. She calls herself the equity feminist. And
wow, that sounds like
she's also pro Gamergate, by the way. She's also pro Gamergate. She's like, oh, like I know. She actually admitted in the beginning of one of her immensely boring videos that she's not a gamer. She knows nothing about gaming. Now I'm a bit of a gamer, so I have a little bit of gaming background. But as I was reading it, because some of the dude bros on Twitter thought that I would be on their side and that I would be supporting Gamergate, so they sent me a link of Christina Sommer's YouTube channel. I forgot what it's called. Oh, she calls herself the factual feminist, I think, and I think that's what the YouTube channel is called as well, the factual feminist. So anyways, someone sent me a link saying, oh, look, Christina Sommer, she's a great feminist. This is a kind of feminist that, I want to get behind and blah, blah, blah. So I clicked the link, right? And she's talking about how she knows nothing about gaming. She knows the video game she's ever played was Pac-Man in some cafeteria in some cafe or something. Pac-Man in the 1970s. That's what she last played. That's all her gaming experience.
1970s?
Yeah, in the 1970s.
Okay.
1970s or something. That's what she said. So, but then she goes on to defending Gamergate and saying that the women and girls do not face, the female players do not face abuse. And I'm like, excuse me, but have you ever come across as soon as you put on the microphone and you say hello while playing Call of Duty, it's like blood in a shark tank. Like all these dude bros would quickly come to you, swarm around you like sharks, and they're like giving you all these explicit sexual comments and how they want to rape you with one of their guns and how they want to do this and that to you. And that's all you hear for 2 hours. That is all you hear from these dude bros. It's from these gamer dude bros.
And that's the issue with, I don't understand why some of the intersectionalists were getting offended by the way the characters looked in the game, like how sexy they were, and why they weren't as angered by the threats, like all that weird verbal threats and rape stuff. Because it seemed like a lot of the feminists were more angered by how sexy and what.
Yeah, for me, the whole the sex appeal thing, that does not bother me.
Yeah.
In the least. Like, that's just like, yeah, okay, whatever, they're fictional characters, come on, they're not real women.
Yeah.
Men, like buff men, like unrealistically buff men, and they're shirtless and whatever, like men are being objectified and sexualized in gaming as well, not just the women. But then when it comes to the gaming experience itself for female players, it's completely different. Not for all female players. Some female players, they don't mind, like they don't care. But for someone like me who's like trying to play a game and all I hear for 2 hours is how all these boys, like on a multiplayer server, all I hear is like people saying they want to rape me because they know that I'm a woman. Because as soon as I talk, they know that I'm a woman, and they're giving me all these sexually explicit statements how they want to rape me and abuse me, and they're gonna hack my address, come down and rape me with one of their guns, and I'm just like what the fuck, right? So
Well, see,
that's disturbing, and
yeah,
that's what I was
yeah.
concerned about. And meanwhile, Christina Sommers, she was like, oh, like gamers are just geeks and nerds, they're harmless, and that's basically what the sum of her video was. Like, oh, geeks, they're just geeks. So apparently geeks don't they are not sexist, they're not capable of sexism, and they're
Mhm.
not capable of abuse. Because
See, because I'm not a gamer, I've rarely heard what you just said that women are actually getting, because all the people who have told me about Gamergate are guys, and to them, I think they focused more with a lot of the intersectional feminists. Like they all focus more on the way that the computer gamer whatever designers, the way that they design the characters, like objectifying, sexualizing women, like making them pretty like Barbie dolls. It's kind of like the Barbie doll argument. That's what I've heard. Your account is one of the first accounts that I've actually heard of actual like women actually getting attacked by being in a room and having the headphones and stuff on. Because I'm not a gamer and I had no idea that that's actually how you play that stuff, that you can interact with people like that. So is that just like military games? Because I do know a lot of people who are into
military
that stuff.
games, and even like role-playing games online, like World of Warcraft. Um, people, it gets sexual, explicitly sexual, really fast.
That's creepy.
And it's very creepy, especially when they're saying shit like they're gonna hack your address and come down and rape you and slit your throat. Like, I mean, come on. And they hate it when you lose, like especially when they know that
Mm-hmm.
their opponent is a female. They think it's kind of a joke to say that they're gonna come down and rape you. Like what the fuck? Like, do you have any idea of the magnitude of what you're actually saying right now? Like, they think that it's kind of like this normal
Mm-hmm.
behavior to tell
You know,
people
it's
that
not
they're gonna come
normal.
down and
That's
rape
not
you. Like,
normal.
that's, yeah, it's they're gonna stalk you. They're gonna find your address. Blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
And then it kind of ruins the gaming experience for women and girls too. Young
Well,
girls play video games too, and
are,
they get
are
like freaked out when people do that to them.
is okay. So the FBI, and I know because I've done this. You can actually make reports for online harassment. Anyone out there, you go to their website and they have a form you fill out. You can contact your local agent in your local city, and any type of online harassment. Is there a way for anyone listening that anyone who actually goes through that, just report it to the FBI if you're in the United States, of course.
Mhm.
So is there like an IP address you can get or a username? Is there any way to identify someone who does that so you actually can make an official report if, let's say, you're in America with the FBI?
I think you can actually get the IP address as long as you know their email address. I'm not very tech savvy, so
Mm-hmm.
I'm not really familiar with how you can find the IP address of gamers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but or maybe there is a way if they're using like
See,
public forums.
yeah,
It might be a little bit easier to get it. But once
this
again,
is
I'm not too familiar
yeah,
with the whole with the technological stuff. I really suck at that.
this is what people need to be talking about when they talk about Gamergate,
Yes,
because
yes.
I wouldn't want knowing what you've just told me. I will, if I theoretically ever have a kid, they will not be playing games online.
Yep,
I don't care
exactly.
whether they're male or female. That's just not going to happen right now.
Exactly.
So that's scary what you told me. And now I understand like that is the real heart of
Mm,
what should have been in the forefront, not how the characters look sexy
yeah,
on video
yeah.
games. So
To
that's
me, when people complain about how, a woman is sexy, oh my God, she's, yes, like women they do tend to be used sexually for commercial use a lot.
mhm,
I understand that, but at the same time, there are women who don't mind that, like it's not really um, causing violence on women. You know what I
mhm,
mean? Like, it's not really hurting the woman. But then there are certain aspects of being sexualized. It's all about perspective, right?
yeah,
So if your perspective is that women are lesser and they're only good for sex, when you see a sexy woman, you're going to be like, oh yeah, like that's what how all women should be like. I'm gonna
mhm.
go rape her. Like, nobody wouldn't give a damn if I rape that woman because she's like half naked, you know and that's how it's all about the perspective, right? But then
Yeah,
there
that's
are people are like, okay, look, women are equal, they're human beings. And hey, look, it's a sexy woman, she looks gorgeous, and they pass by, right? That's it. That's as far as their input on a sexy woman is, like it doesn't branch out into all these creepy fantasies and that spill onto
Yeah.
real life, right? So people need to exercise their brain to view women as equal, because the bottom line is, if you are already dehumanizing women, when you
Hmm.
see a sexy woman, what are you going to see? You are just going to see a piece of flesh, right? That's all that a person whose nature is to be a sexist and a misogynist will see. But a
Hmm.
person who respects a woman, who sees that women are equal beings and that they deserve respect, they're not going to try to exploit that woman, you know.
Yeah.
And if you're intent on exploiting the woman because of her, because she looks sexy or whatever, then that's where the problem is. It's
Yeah.
all about the
Oh yeah.
perception, and people need to start to understand that there are certain, the context. The
Hmm.
context is how you perceive sexiness. You
Hmm.
think sexiness is bad, it's immodest, it's immoral, it's a sin. The religious people, you know, like they think that a sexy woman is like it's like the fucking whore of Babylon, right? Like they think she's like the worst of the
Yeah.
worst, like a sexy woman. How dare she? She's seducing all these men, like blah blah blah. But then for a normal person who is educated, who is well in touch with reality, who respects women, they're not going to look at a sexy woman and find ways to exploit her and abuse her and
Hmm.
dehumanize her, So there's a lot of things that people need to be educated on, how they translate or how they interpret their perceptions, and how that can greatly affect how they um, how they define sexism
Hmm.
and misogyny and even patriarchy as a whole. Usually, when I talk about patriarchy, like I don't say just patriarchy, I say mainstream patriarchy,
Yeah.
because there is patriarchy where fathers are great, like men are great leaders, they support their female members, they give
Hmm.
equal opportunity. And then there's the mainstream patriarchy, which we are um, that we are used to, that we know of since the dawn of civilizations, which is based on regarding women as lesser, women should just give birth, take care of the kids, and that's all they ever have to do. Women can get slapped around, they can get raped, they can, whatever, they are properties and nothing more. So there's that kind of patriarchy. And the West has slowly overcome it, but it's very foolish to believe that under 100 years West has completely eradicated like thousands of years of
Hmm.
misogyny and sexism. Like, how stupid are you to actually believe that? You think
There.
that
Yeah.
something that is systematic, yes, when it comes to policy, yes, violence against women is being outlawed, but then there are certain systemic behavior which has been passed on from one generation to the next that finds a way to get past those policies. Like a
Hmm.
judge who says that this was actually in the United States. One of the, I forgot the names, but one of the teachers, like a 50-year-old man, a 45 or 50-year-old man, was repeatedly raping this 14-year-old girl. And finally, when she told the parents, and I think the girl actually committed suicide later on, but then the judge sentenced the rapist to only 1 month in jail, because apparently she was 14 years old and she looked more grown up
Oh my
than
God.
she actually was. Therefore, she should have known that what he was doing to her was wrong and should have come forward sooner than later. So the
That's
girl
yeah.
actually committed suicide after that hearing, because apparently, because she looked older, she's supposed to think like an adult.
Hmm.
Imagine the kind of backward mentality that judge had.
Yeah. Well,
30 days for
mhm.
repeatedly raping a 14-year-old girl.
My cousin, and I've talked about this, is one of the part of my impetus to be against and to really stand up against adoption trafficking. I had a 14-year-old cousin who was raped, and was raped and ended up pregnant, even though conservatives say that can't happen. It can, and had the baby at 15, and then it was taken away from her, and it was trafficked, meaning it was sold.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing stories about my grandmother saying how the judge treated her. And this stuff still happens in America, and the people don't believe it. It's there in the news, and they don't believe it. Yeah, I've seen so much of this crap.
They often confuse um, okay, when it comes to the United States or Canada, there is a huge, loud, noisy platform that condemns sexual abuse. There's a lot of people who condemn it. So people get confused. They're like, oh, look, a lot of people are condemning sexual abuse. So obviously it doesn't happen, right? Like, I'm like,
Mhm.
no. The reality is a lot of people are still committing rape and
Mhm.
molestations of children and adults. But there's a huge platform that supports victims. But that doesn't mean that because victims have support that there is no rape culture.
Mhm.
And you have to be you have to be in a certain range of room temperature IQ to actually claim that support for rape victims equals no rape culture. You know, like how imbecilic are you to argue with me that rape culture doesn't exist because there's a platform for rape victims?
See, and that's more of that kind of ties into what you were talking about earlier about the whole fallacy. Well, I haven't seen it, so therefore it doesn't exist. Well, we have, care and services and platforms for victims, so therefore we must have solved the problem.
Mhm.
It's a very black and white, very base, stupid way of seeing the world, really.
It's systemic abuse. Sexual violence is very systemic. It's passed on from one
Hmm.
generation to the next since, as I said earlier, since the dawn of civilizations. People have been normalizing sex abuse, especially when it's sex abuse on the female
Hmm.
population.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so you're telling me that this is all being eradicated? Like, come on,
I know.
tens of thousands of women complain of rape each and every single year, yet less than 3% make it to the courts. How is
Yeah.
that not rape
Hmm.
culture? Because the prosecutor's office will not take cases they know will lose.
Exactly. And that's exactly it. And,
And that
I have friends who are attorneys. I see it all the time.
and the
Yeah.
rape kits that don't get tested for years, it's sitting on the shelf
Hmm.
collecting dust.
Yeah.
Why is it that a rape kit is not a priority? And then once they do test it, they find out, oh my god, look, it's a serial rapist. 30
Hmm.
30 women had done a rape kit, and there's multiple women who have been victimized by this one rapist who could have been caught 10 years ago if they had actually did the rape kit, tested the
Hmm.
rape kit. So you're telling me that there is no rape culture when rape kits are not even considered a priority.
Hmm.
So every single time I hear anti-feminists telling me that the West no longer needs feminism, I I can't I cannot look at them. I cannot look at them and even formulate anything respectful, because
Hmm.
I get really incredibly frustrated with them, with
Yeah.
their willful
Yeah.
ignorance. And it's not just willful ignorance, it's like a selective ignorance, when it
Yeah.
comes to
It's
things that
very,
that oppresses and abuses women. Then suddenly, like, they take a step back. Suddenly they want evidence. Suddenly they want all these things that they would otherwise not demand when a man is being abused,
yeah.
and when it came to the attacks in Cologne, they said sent all these Muslim rapists back where they came from, you know? And
Hmm.
I'm like, but wait a minute, aren't you going to ask for evidence now? Like, yes, what they did was wrong. Yes, they should be prosecuted, but they will never ever talk about how these Muslim rapists are also facing the same legal procedure as any other native rapists. They don't see how the law fails rape victims, but they want Muslims to be deported without prosecution. They've already found them guilty because women complained, because Western women said they were raped by Muslim migrants.
Mhm.
So they wanted all of these migrants to be deported. But then at the same time, when a native man rapes, they're like, "Oh, please show me evidence." Like they want
Yeah.
evidence for all these native, because for them it hurts their pride. It hurts their pride when it comes to how feminists have always been saying, rape culture exists in the West and that the laws are failing rape victims.
Because
Now,
one thing that really irks me about the whole where you're talking about, oh, they need proof when it's a woman, but when it's a man, they suddenly don't need proof, or they twist and they'll use the same. And I've seen them do this on Pew Research. I've seen them take those stats and twist them and use them to their advantage by saying, well, look, here it happens to men too. But they weren't okay with that, with the real numbers being applied to women.
women, exactly.
Yeah, but one thing that's one interesting tidbit that you will never hear someone who is running around screaming, men are now disenfranchised, which is not true. Men have never been marginalized or disenfranchised because of sex and gender, and
Exactly.
they never will be. So let's just say that and get that out there. But not only that, one thing that they don't, that these weird people will not address and say, that I will say that I've said, is a lot of this male on male rape and violence is happening from men. It's
Exactly.
men doing it to men.
Exactly.
But that's not politically correct, because you may be called a homophobe and you don't want to be a homophobe. And I sit here knowing three men who have, my good friends, who have confided in me that they were attacked by men. And one was a straight friend of mine who was with his girlfriends in a gay bar, and he slipped a roofie in his drink, and he was literally sexually assaulted. And the reason these three guys never come forward, or never came forward, I should say, is because they were afraid of being called homophobic. Number one, the whole laughing at, well, I got raped thing, and they were afraid of the politically correct social justice warrior backlash if they would be called a homophobe if they reported their assaults. And that has made me so angry. And the fact that I carry that secret with them. And I know what happened. And the horrible thing is that that's a thing, because it's politically incorrect to say, this gay guy over here attacked me. What the fuck? But and all these people screaming men's rights, men's rights, men's rights. They want to pretend like it's women doing this. No, we're the ones that they're confiding in. We're the ones who are angry because, you know what? Social justice warriors, or regressive left, whatever the hell we want to call them, the PC police, the cry bullies, have made it politically incorrect and almost completely, like, you're calling someone a racial slur if you come out and you say, I was assaulted by this gay guy. That's politically incorrect. And that's a point that, I have made. And these people say, well, it happens to men just as much. I'm like, well, then you know why men aren't reporting it? Because you assholes won't allow it to happen, because you scream it's politically incorrect when they try to.
Exactly. Most of the men who, excuse me, most of the men I've come across that argue that there is no rape culture against women, they were more than thrilled to bring up prison rape.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, so you believe that prison rape exists, and majority of these prison rapes are committed by, guess who? Men. So how does that not bother you? Because these are not just groups of people who are raping just men. They rape women as well. Women, boys,
Mm-hmm.
girls. Nobody is free from them.
Exactly.
So why is it not okay to say, look, men have a problem? They are the 90%, over 90% of rape, like actual rape, not molestations, but rapes are committed by heterosexual males. And even the ones in prison
Mm-hmm.
that's doing the rape are also heterosexual males.
Yeah, you're right. A lot of prison rape is heterosexual, because they I don't know if they would, if they weren't in that situation. I have no idea. I don't want to speak whether they do that or not, but that always bothers me that they don't acknowledge that.
And it bothers them so much every single time you talk about this, because then you're going to have a discussion about this whole heteronormative culture where they are at the top of everything.
Mm-hmm.
They are the dominant uh, gender with with that kind of sexuality and with that kind of sex. They are male, they are hetero, and they are going on. They commit most of the rapes, and God forbid you say, like they are, responsible, they are accountable. Not like every single male, not every single heterosexual male, but the ones who are committing these rapes, these rape sprees are, they just happen to be heterosexual male. So there's nothing wrong with saying that. And but then they only get upset when you talk about how women are being raped by these men. They have no problem pointing out the same source of statistics about prison rapes. But then when you talk about the same source talking about rapes against women, then suddenly they want to, bust its myth, and they call Christina Sommers, who would be like, oh, and she also hates the whole heteronormative narrative as well. She thinks that she's very conservative, and yeah, she's not exactly as rational and reasonable and logical and factual as she presents herself to be. Because I would often see her, not often, but just like the few times that I have actually gone through her profile, I would look at some of her videos and some of the articles that she's written, and it's always about busting the myth about violence against women and rape culture. So if these are all myths, then what are the facts?
And
People, they fail to tell what the fact is. They just want to bash feminists.
That's
at the
yeah,
end of the day, that's what they want to do.
yeah.
They just want to bash feminists and keep going.
And they don't care if they get a, sorry to use these terms, but a good one or a bad one. They don't care if they bash you or I, or if they go and they bash someone like Anna Sarkeesian. They don't seem to be able to distinguish the difference.
Yeah. And they don't mind generalizing feminists, but then they whine about how men are being generalized. And I'm like, but I'm sorry, but when I say that men disproportionately sexually abuse women, that is a fact. That is a solid fact. If you're a factual feminist, you would acknowledge that. You're not going to argue with me and tell me that it's a lie, that it's a feminist lie. It's a statement of fact. Just as it's like listening to a bunch of religious people arguing that the Quran does not say what it says about verse 434. They're like the crap that it says about the women and Jews and black people and and the LGBT community. Like, people want to argue that this is not what it actually means, when it is exactly what it means. It's out of context. It's being misinterpreted. That's all I hear from people like Christina Sommers. Men are being misrepresented because facts are being said. It's nonsensical.
But then they're very selective with what they call a fact. For instance, they'll tweet out their little link, and it won't even be scholarly or academic. They'll tweet out a link like they fart out a fart.
Exactly.
And this is a goddamn fact. And I'm like, no, motherfucker. I don't say that because I do have class because I'm a Southerner. But I think it. I'm like, no, motherfucker. That's not a fact. And if you were my student, I would fail you. You would flunk. Yeah. And there's a lot of stupidity out. Stupid. I told one friend, you can't cure stupid. You just can't cure stupid. If they want to be stupid, they're going to be stupid. And they're going to find some stupid shit to say. And the rest of us just have to acknowledge that and just move on, because it's almost like the more you argue with them, I think the more that we're validating them. And that's the last thing I want to do is validate one of these creeps. But, and I ran across some that we're talking to, I think a friend of mine and I started talking to, and on Twitter, of course, I said talking, but tweeting. They were basically making claims that all forms of female genital mutilation it was equal to like genital mutilation, just like
the male circumcision.
Yeah. And I was like, no, everyone knows that that's not a thing. Being scraped bare and then sewed up with the remains is that's far worse. I think everyone knows that. And they made, and I just ended up reporting their ass, but and I just stopped talking to him, and the guy that they were actually claiming that backed their thesis up, I tweeted at him and I said, will you please tell your MRA followers to stop talking to me? Because we're not friends and we're not going to be friends, and you've lost an ally in your calls there. And he apologized and everything. He said, I don't know who they are, blah, blah, blah. So I just retweeted him. He's like, I don't condone any of this, but I went straight to their source that they were taking out of context. They probably took the guy out of context, to be fair. They probably really took this man out of context. But that's what happens when you get assholes that don't know shit and that would flunk out of college on Twitter. Because for better or for worse, the internet's a platform, even for dumbasses, y'all.
Yeah. Unfortunately, right? Unfortunately.
Yeah.
And you're gonna come across a lot of these dumbasses, and I have, like, each and every single day I mute like hundreds of these dumbasses. I don't block them, I just mute them.
Yeah.
But they will keep talking to me, but I will never respond to them or acknowledge their tweets. So they're gonna get frustrated. They will get frustrated, and then they will just keep on going, and I'll just keep on going, not giving a shit, right? So
yeah.
and,
Well,
and I rarely block people, but the ones that I do block, they are usually Islamists, or they are pure misogynists, you know, and they just don't, or rape apologists. The rape apologists, like they, like those three categories of people, they are probably the most regressive group of people that you can come across online. They are so moronic. Like they have like an IQ of a 5-year-old. I shouldn't say 5-year-old cat. They have an IQ of of something that is completely, because it's insulting to the cat, first of all.
yeah.
So I don't really want to, insult the cats. Cats. And I see that you have a cat there on the chair.
Yeah, I have several cats. I have 6 total.
I'm sorry, kitties. I don't want to associate you guys with these douchebags, but they really have no brain,
Yeah.
They are airheaded. They cannot formulate a proper argument without resorting to bashing feminism. Every time you give them a fact, they're like, oh my God, you feminists. Like, as if my statement of fact has anything to do with me being a feminist. Like, do I really have to be a feminist to talk about or condemn wrongs? Like,
I know, yeah.
I mean, do I really have to be a feminist? Do I have to have like the feminist label plastered on my forehead to say, hey, look, rape is bad?
Yeah, I know, really. I mean,
like, stop being a feminist and saying rape is bad, okay? Because it's like generalizes all men. Like that's how stupid they are,
Back in my day, we had a hand gesture for something that dumb. It went like this.
Yeah.
So, dude bros, there you go. Yeah, I was part of that American Pie generation, college generation. The last ones that got out right before PC totally took over back in like the late 90s, early 2000s. I got out of undergrad in the early 2000s. Yeah. So I was part of the American Pie. We were.
I'm a high school dropout. So I dropped out back in 2002, I think. Yeah, 2002 or 2003, I dropped out. And then I tried going back to college. And I lasted in college like for about 2 months before I could not stand the whole SJW.
Oh God, yeah.
All that nonsense. Like, oh my goodness, like people were just insane, and even the teaching was so boring. Like, I'm like, why am I sitting in a class doing things I've already learned on my own? Like, I know how to draw. I mean, I'm a graphic designer. And why am I paying thousands of dollars just to get a piece of paper that says I can do what I already know, which I taught myself?
Yeah.
And I just like had it. I was just, guys, like, fuck this shit, and I dropped out of college.
Well, see, and you mentioned something like the whole social justice warrior thing that started. Okay, so I graduated from UTC, University of Tennessee at Chattanooga, 2001. And I got out of graduate school. I took a break and worked for a while and then went back to graduate school. Well, I graduated graduate school in 2007 with a master's in English. And the difference between the pre 9/11 days and the post 9/11 and everything that came between. And by the time I was in graduate school, like that social justice warrior rhetoric was and jargon was firmly going. And I mean, it was just you couldn't look like you were going to look at somebody cross-eyed without someone crying about it,
Mhm.
like bizarre stuff. So that I completely understand.
To escape from reality, like, because reality hurts.
Yeah.
Like, hug your teddy bears and drink some hot chocolate with marshmallows and cozy up with on a beanbag, and please don't just keep yourself far away from reality as possible, because these college snowflakes can't handle reality.
Yeah.
And
And
that is
yeah.
unbelievable, because a college or a university, it's a learning institution, it's an educational institution, and these kids are basically fighting to keep children away from reality, from
Yeah.
learning. They are offended, okay, so they're entitled to shut people down from having a conversation or a
Mhm.
discussion, or whatever, because it's offensive. So if something is offensive to you, you're going to cry that you're a victim. You're a victim of what? Of reality.
Mhm.
So what? Like what kind of reality are they expecting to to groom here? Like, do they really want to have a reality where people just shut their mouth when they disagree with something? That people should not challenge ideas anymore because
Mhm.
challenging ideas is offensive? I mean, the West
Yeah.
would not be as progressive as it is today without having been challenged, without that, one odd voice saying, look, this is bullshit, that without someone saying, society should be secular. Imagine if nobody said society should be secular. Imagine if that word wasn't even coined.
Yeah, I know.
The kind of the bullshit theocracy that we'd be living in today,
Yeah.
because nobody dared to challenge theocracy in the first place because it's offensive, you know
Mhm.
and this is the frustration with me in the Eastern world, because where I come from as a South Asian, religion, you should never ever offend people's religious sentiment or their sexist sentiments, their misogynistic love fest. You
Mhm.
know, God forbid you actually call them out on their bullshit. Then you're being disrespectful to their crappy
Mhm.
culture and their crappy religion. And people often say, you should just mind your own business, go live your life. Stop disrespecting, um, you know, these primitive behaviors. And they would only care if it ever actually that kind of bigotry spills on into their own personal space. But
Mhm.
even then, a lot would actually submit to it. They would be like, oh, I don't want any trouble, I'm just going to back away as you keep spilling yourself into my space. You're going to keep taking away my rights, so I'm
Yeah.
just going to keep backing away until one day you're not going to be able to do shit. Like, what are you going to do when everything you say and do is offensive?
Yeah, that's the point we're getting to. And I feel like and you're probably very in a similar boat to me. I feel like because I'm pretty much a moderate person, and I just don't hold to one label. I'm many things. I'm a feminist. I'm a wife. I'm atheist. I'm humanist, but I feel like I'm very grounded, and I don't like extremes. And I feel that sometimes extremes want you to take their side. Like if I speak out, which I have a couple times against intersectional third wave and the hypocrisy, the moral hypocrisy, as you call it, suddenly someone over here who's anti-feminist will want me to be an anti-feminist now. Do you feel like you're kind of stretched between those two extremes, like they're playing tug of war with you sometimes? Because I feel like the minute that you criticize one, the other wants to lay claim to you.
Yeah, when it comes to the extremes, I mean, like, I'm in the middle ground. For me, I enjoy my logical consistency. No one can take that away from me.
Hmm.
Um, if people are offended from two different sides, I really despise having to appease people. So
Hmm.
I don't appease them. I just tell them, hey, look, here's the fact. Here is reality. So get connected. I mean, if you're not going to get connected with what's actually happening around you, if you're not going to inform yourself, if you're not going to educate yourself, then don't bother me with your bullshit.
Mhm.
because your ignorance is not my responsibility. At the end of the day, you have the onus is on you to learn.
Mhm.
I'm not going to sit there for 2 hours and educate you with 140 characters on Twitter.
Yeah.
Get out
That's
there,
yeah.
educate yourself. And I know that a lot of people use that whole educate yourself slogan with or sorry expression with the SJWs, but the truth is that you should go educate yourself. If something
Mhm.
is as complex as as human rights is being discussed, and if I give one perspective and one narrative, that doesn't mean that that's all there's to it. I mean, and usually I'm very specific when it comes to stating specific forms of abuses, you know, and who the perpetrators are. And
Mhm.
not a lot of people like that when I get specific. They're like, oh wait, like what about men? You know, like you never talk about men being abused. And then I'm like, well, first of all, why is it that I cannot talk about women's problem? I mean, I'm a woman, this affects me personally. So I talk about it because I've experienced the abuse, I'm
Mhm.
witnessing the abuse. And me as a woman, I would be more effective if I talk about women's rights. And
Yeah.
when I'm seeing justice happening to men, if I ever see a headline about men being abused, I post about it, you know? I talk about it. I condemn the abuses that they face.
Mhm.
um, but me, when it comes to the kind of activism that I do, it does focus on women's rights because I myself am a woman. You know, I don't know what it's like to be a man. All I know is that women, men, boys, and girls, we all deserve equal rights and justice. But at the same time, you want me to talk, invest time in something that that I cannot that I cannot possibly um, um, that I cannot understand because I'm not hearing enough male perspective on the kind of abuse that they endure. The only thing that I hear from most MRAs is about how women are horrible people. It's like always that anti-women feminist bashing narratives that I keep
Mhm.
hearing. So I need information from men that, hey, look, this is the kind of abuses that men face, and this is the kind of abuses that women face. And they are all unique. Like all cases of abuses are obviously unique, but the overall perspective is that when it comes to my is gender based violence, and that's what my focus is on, gender based violence. And as a woman, my focus is most primarily is
Mhm.
on abuses that women face, because
Yeah.
this is something that I actually can get into. You know, I've lived in two violence against women shelter, so I know what it's like. I know that I can go to my old shelters and get the information that I need. I can walk into the shelter today, pull out some information from the counselors, and walk out. Um, whereas, I can't do something like that when it comes to specific abuses that men face.
Mhm.
Because first of all, there is no shelters for males, and people have often asked me, like, how come you don't talk about men not having shelters? And I'm like, how is it that men are not fighting for men to have shelters? Why are you telling me that it's my fault that men don't have shelters? Is it my fault? Did I say men can't have shelters when they're being abused? No, like you go fight. Women fought for it for years before governments decided to fund shelters for abused women, you know? And even now, some are being shut down.
Mhm. Yeah,
And
very true.
3,000, every single, in Canada, approximately 3,000 women every single day turn to a violence against a women shelter. And
Mhm.
the rest of them, like across Canada, not just like within Toronto, but across Canada, 3,000
Mhm.
women and their children seek shelter from domestic violence. And many more, hundreds, thousands more, are turned away. So for me, I'm obviously going to be focusing on it because as a human being, I cannot, with one brain, with the brain that I have, I have to have a focus on one thing, one priority, you know? And the
Mhm.
best way I can do this is by doing what I know, the thing that I am very familiar with. And that is the logical approach to any kind of activism. If you know something, if you know um, more, if you're more familiar with one topic, then obviously you're going to be pursuing that, right?
Hmm.
So, I'm not gonna, as a graphic designer, I mean, I guess I could take science courses if I wanted to, but like, it doesn't interest me, because as much as I love science, I don't want to become a physicist,
Yeah.
I don't want to become a doctor,
Yeah.
So I'm gonna go to a graphic designing classes. I'm gonna go to, whatever that I am that that draws my knowledge,
Hmm.
and the place where I can be most effective as an activist is focusing on the abuses that women and girls face. And
Hmm.
not just women and girls, but like also children, like whether it's a
Yeah.
boy or a girl, women and children, because they are the ones who are most affected by violence, domestic violence,
Hmm.
and sex abuse.
Yep.
So like I'm sorry, like I can't carry the weight of the world on my back. I mean, it's it's already exhausting enough. Oh, and I see a black cat. I'm gonna go pet
Yeah, there's another one. Yeah.
yeah, so it's like, people, they say like, oh, you're not condemning all of these abuses, and I'm like, but yeah, but like, I don't know that this happened to this person and that person. Like, I cannot go personally and condemn each and every single case of
Mhm.
abuse that pops up. The people are asking for the impossible, which is why I use feminism to encourage equality
Mhm.
and justice among both sexes and gender. And people have an issue with that because it's feminism. And the anti-feminists who get pedantic about the term feminism, they're like, oh, the word is sexist because it has fem in feminism. And I'm like, so what about man in mankind? Are you against that too?
Yeah, really.
Like, really, like, you really want to go there? Like, we women, every everything that's associated with the feminine expressions are derived from men. But
Mhm.
what they are called, who they are, like, we just get like one little extra letter added to our vocabulary, and there you go. That's feminine. That's the feminine form of. It's frustrating. Like, I even
Yeah.
hate talking about it because that's how boring it is. Like,
Yeah.
that's how amazingly pathetic it is when people get that shallow, like that cheap about words, because fem in feminism is sexist. And that's like an anti-feminist who is saying that fem in
Mhm.
feminism is sexist, because fem, and God forbid a woman actually says anything about
Yeah.
anything sexist that that they have to experience since time began, then suddenly we are overreacting. We should be happy about being catcalled because it's just a compliment. And when we're being groped, oh, that's also a compliment. Like,
Yeah.
stop overreacting. That's just men being obnoxious, you know?
Yeah, that's yeah.
Yeah, like, no, no, dude, like, if you grab my boobs, you're assaulting me. That's sexual assault. It's not
Yeah.
men being obnoxious. I
Yeah.
would report your ass to the cops, you know?
Mhm.
And then you can explain yourself in court how you grabbing my boobs were just you being obnoxious and not a violation of my rights and my
Mhm.
dignity.
So, wow, we've gone on for like 2 hours.
Have we? Yes, we have.
Should we talk about Star Trek, or should we save it for another time and just do a Star Trek? This has been really heavy, y'all.
I can talk about Star Trek for a couple of minutes, and then we can I can come back another time.
Okay,
Definitely.
so good. So see, because I wore this for you today.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, it's
It was
nice.
just
I
for you.
love
I
it. Where
wore
did
it
you
for
get
you.
it?
Huh?
Where did you get that shirt?
Okay, I ordered it online. I
Okay.
ordered it from this. You have you heard of this little store? It's called Forever 21.
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
It was on clearance. I just came across it. I think you know how Google puts up ads, and I saw it, and I got it for like I think like $7 or something on clearance. That's where I
Wow.
got it.
Yeah,
So yeah,
but that
but
shirt is super cute.
so you were watching Voyager a few weeks ago. You went on a Voyager binge.
Yes. And I've only watched up to 2 seasons, and I'm
Mhm.
on to the third season. But then I was just like, okay, but I want to finish Enterprise because I started Enterprise a little bit before that. So I was like, it was really difficult for me to choose like Star Trek Voyager or Enterprise.
Really?
So I decided to go
Yeah.
back. I'll start from the very last
Yeah.
series, and then I will slowly go back.
Okay.
I'll
Okay.
go backwards in time. Okay,
Okay.
so I decided to finish Enterprise, and I still haven't finished it. I'm still watching Enterprise. I'm like halfway through the last season, the fourth season, the fourth and final season.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
I
So
I'm so disappointed when it was
really.
canceled.
Yeah, me too. But okay, so that fourth season, in my opinion, was kind of their best
Mhm.
because they had like a lot of Vulcan episodes, and everyone knows I had this ear fetish thing. I do elves, Vulcans, Romulans. It doesn't matter. I have a weird thing for pointed ears. I always have. I
Elf.
can't explain it, but no, and it's actually a thing. There's actually an ear fetish.
Yeah.
But so anyway, I always thought that was like the best season because it had like and did you haven't finished it, so I don't want to say.
As I said, I've already watched it before, right? But I'm just like,
Uh-huh.
this is like my third time watching it again. So
Okay. So, but you know where we're with T'Pol, what was her name? T'Pol,
yeah, Paul, yeah,
where they were basically going to lead in that was it going to be her father who was Romulan? Like he was going to turn out to be a Romulan? Did you read about that? Like that's where they were going to go on season 5. But
yeah,
they were actually going to take it back and look at the I don't know if you've seen the original series, but the original series where they introduced the Romulans. The episode is called Balance of Terror. Yeah, I'm a geek. And they're actually going to go back and like kind of merge like the Romulan mythology in there. So, and I was really disappointed that it got canceled because that would have been really interesting, especially what they did with Spock and Next Generation and reunification.
Mhm.
And I just geeked out hard.
I have not. I watched some some of the seasons of the original Star Trek, but I never actually fully finished.
Mhm.
And it was also old, so I was just like, I'm a bit of a I'm a little bit noobish about watching really old shows. Like it doesn't for some reason it just doesn't grab my interest as the modern shows.
Mhm.
So even like the older films, like the black and white films, like I have a great difficult time just appreciating them, you know, because I understand they're good. Like yes, they're obviously good because so many people have told me, but like I can't sit down and focus on it because it's so old, right?
Really?
So I've tried watching Star Trek like the original one though, but I hadn't been able to sit through like all of the seasons for it.
The,
And
yeah, I
you said
see.
the fifth season though, it was supposed to be like T'Pol is supposed to be like half Romulan.
Yeah, half Romulan. She was supposed to be half Romulan, and they were kind of taking it back to like the original Trek because one thing I liked about the original Star Trek, and you could just go back and just like Google like and just watch the episodes with the Vulcans and the Romulans, and that'll give you a lot of the backdrop, a lot of the mythology of Star Trek because it used to be more about that. And they kind of lost it as they went on, especially into Voyager. They lost a lot of that heart where you're talking about the history of the Federation
Mhm.
and going back to the Vulcans finding us and making first contact. They focused a lot on that in the original and the whole the Spock's history. That was key. That was probably the one reason I really liked Star Trek was that character Spock.
Mhm.
And that's what they were going to set up in Enterprise. They were going to start making the connections like they were in the original series. So I was really disappointed because it is like elves in space.
It is, yeah.
And I think that's really cool and hot. So there you
I think
go.
it ended in what 2005, right? So yeah, the last episode was aired in 2005,
Mhm.
and it should have got. I mean, and I know that I heard that a lot of the Star Trek fans they were really upset about Enterprise because it didn't meet their standard, and that's the reason why it had such few viewers,
Mhm.
which resulted in the cancellation. People were like, "Oh," and I'm like, "But this was before the original Star Trek.
Yeah.
This is when people were um, discovering things. The humans were discovering new species or and meeting them and discovering new planets and parts of the discovering the Alpha Quadrant. And you're saying that you don't like it because you know you can't you can't find the original excitement that you drew from the original series, right?
I think those people may have been like, I don't know, but a lot of those people were like fans of the Next Generation.
Hmm.
But I thought Enterprise did a really good job of kind of trying to harken back to the very, very original.
It did. And also like it's like some of my Trekkie friends, we've talked about this, and the ones that did watch like the um the whole the original series,
Hmm.
and the ones like me that were, we just like, I just started watching from the next generation forward, but I did not watch the originals.
Hmm.
um, we were having a discussion about all this, and we were like, okay, but some of, like, most of them disagreed. Like, they did not fancy Enterprise at all. They're like, oh, it's so boring. Like, they're
Gosh.
destroying. Like, they're like, oh, they completely destroyed everything that Star Trek was. And I'm like, but this this is like the beginning. Like,
Yeah.
it's describing
Yeah.
how all that came to be, like all that stuff that you love about the original Star Trek,
Hmm.
and after beyond that, like, it's explaining, it's giving you an insight into what
Yeah.
happened with the Enterprise.
Well, I think there's a lot of purists too that like after Gene Roddenberry died, they don't like anything that came after Gene Roddenberry
Yeah.
died.
Yep.
So
Yep.
there's a lot of purists out there like that, and that's kind of annoying. I actually could never get into Voyager. I didn't like the fact. See, I thought Voyager was kind of, to me it was like so out there and so off base because I liked like the saga. I liked seeing like the normal people that you saw. That's one reason I really love Deep Space Nine. Deep Space Nine was probably my favorite after the original Deep Space Nine, then Enterprise, because Deep Space Nine kind of showed how the Federation, they were not all white,
Hmm.
lily white, I mean, innocent. The Federation, it was really gritty and political, and just there was a lot of espionage and underhanded things and an oligarchy. It showed some of that, and it showed conspiracy theories, not just, in the Cardassian Empire and the Romulan Empire, but also the Federation. I'm like, that's more like real life, even though it's not. It's still escapism and science fiction. That, the fact that no one is perfect, no one is perfect, and that's one thing that bugged me about the Next Generation is that the Federation was always perfect and they always did everything perfect. And I was like, no, 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 no. There's another side of the story, and that always bugged me. There was something that I just couldn't, even though I liked a lot of the episodes and stuff, and back in its day, The Next Generation was cool. I know it looks kind of cheesy now, but I don't know. I always felt like it whitewashed the Federation, and a lot of that kind of came out in Deep Space Nine, I felt.
Yeah, and the Ferengis.
Yeah, they were crazy.
Their little ear fetish. Oh.
No, 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 not that kind of ear, y'all. Not that kind of ear. That's gross.
No, I meant their ear fetish.
Oh, their ear
Like, yeah,
fetish.
like they can
That's
like
right.
sit
They
down
did
and
have an ear
massage,
fetish.
massage their ears, right?
Oh goodness, I forgot all about that. Yeah.
They had a
But,
couple of episodes in Enterprise with the Ferengis, and it was like, it was so wonderful. I loved getting into Enterprise, and then it was like my heart being ripped out when it got canceled.
mhm.
And so my favorite series, it starts with Enterprise, and then Voyager, and then Next Generation, and then Deep Space Nine. Um, and I actually never watched like the full season of, like the full series season of Deep Space Nine either,
Mhm.
because Star Trek Next Generation, it was always on rerun on cable.
Mhm.
But then when Deep Space Nine was when that came out, I really wasn't watching TV at that time,
Yeah.
so I was always doing something else. And um, I was like a huge anime fan as well. So there's like a huge chunk of my childhood that was dedicated to anime as well. So that's when, like, I kind of forgot about Star Trek for a while before I came back on. So yeah, like Deep Space Nine, I've only watched it once, and I haven't watched like all of it as well. Just like with the original
Mhm.
series. So maybe if I give it another try, I might be able to enjoy it. And I have them. I'm gonna watch all of them eventually. Like,
Yeah.
as soon as I'm done with Enterprise, I'm gonna finish Voyager.
Mhm.
And I really liked Voyager because they're actually uh, in uh, in the Delta Quadrant. They
Mhm.
got they got sucked into the Delta Quadrant, by the wormhole, and Now they have to, find a way back to the Alpha Quadrant, and it's going to take like 75 years for them to do that, right?
Mhm.
And I still remember, I don't know if this was the final episode or not, but I think the final episode of Voyager ended with them finding out that they were not really the original crew. Like the original crew got
Oh,
stuck
really?
with, I don't know, I can't remember, but it's like such a vague memory because I watched it like several years ago, right? I think the
Yeah.
last time I watched Voyager was I think 10 years ago. Like I was preparing to watch Enterprise, and
Mhm.
I was watching the reruns on TV,
Mhm.
and it had like a really weird ending. And I don't know if they actually ever came home either. They kind of just kept on exploring. I may be
Huh.
wrong here, and I'm sorry if I offend you guys. But it was such a long time ago. Like my memory is so vague. But I'm actually like rushing to. I'm like restraining myself from just like
Yeah.
clicking on that last episode because
Mhm.
I think that's how it went down. Like they found out that initially when they got pulled into this black hole, they never actually got out. It was like their wrong side or something. I don't know. I completely forgot. But
Wow.
my memory, it's playing games with me now. But it's so interesting because they were in this uncharted part of the universe, right?
Mhm.
The Delta Quadrant, and they're alone. They have they have to rely on themselves. Their human counterpart is like billions of light years away, 75 years away,
Mhm.
and even at warp speed 6, you know they can't make it before some of them,
Mhm.
half the crew actually dies of old age, right?
Yeah.
I think though the one of the things that really bothers me about Voyager is it was so boring though because they were always alone, right?
Yeah.
Always
See.
alone. It's like the same story over and over and over
Yeah.
again. And that character, Kez, he
Yes,
really
Cass.
annoyed me. Like I did not like
Really?
Kez one bit. Like I don't know why, but I couldn't like
Did you
her.
did you like 7 and 9?
I like 7 to 9, yeah.
See, I did too. And people got really pissed off when she was brought on. They're like, "Oh, it's just because she's hot." But I'm like, "No, she's a really good character. Actually, I thought she
She is.
was a really good
Really good
character."
character. She kind of made it more entertaining,
Yeah, she did.
And unlike the whole Kez, oh my god, I'm still trying to figure out like why was she even there? Like you did not need Kez and Neelix on
Yeah,
on the Voyager, right?
yeah, yeah.
They just
Hmm.
made the show so boring, and the show kind of became redundant, and I think
Yeah,
that's
it
the reason
did.
why a lot of people don't like
Yeah.
it.
Hmm.
Um, but I don't know, I just kind of like that journey that Voyager had,
Yeah.
and it was a little bit more different from the rest of it was definitely different from the rest of the other series.
Hmm.
um, it had like a calm, and they were exploring things that were not previously discovered, and it was like kind of like a challenge for me. It was a challenge for them, and for me, like I was like very excited to see what they would be discovering and who they'd be coming across, and yeah. But I think like my overall favorite when it comes to Star Trek is like the whole time traveling thing, and I think that's
Hmm.
the reason why I love Enterprise so much.
Oh
Because
yeah. Okay.
the time traveling for me, anything that has to do with time traveling, I'll be watching it.
Do you like Doctor Who? Are you a
I
fan?
love Doctor Who.
Really? Yeah.
I'm a crazy Doctor Who fan. Like I watched Doctor Who several times, more times than I watched the Star Trek series.
Wow. You see now,
So
and I grew up with the original guy with the scarf.
mhm,
That doctor. I remember watching him when I was young.
yeah.
So when
I
because my mom.
I
Yeah.
have not watched the original, but I only watched the ones from 2005 and
Hmm.
on. So, but then my friend who did watch the original, she told me that they're just like the ones that are being made now, but
Hmm.
it's just a little bit older. And
Yeah.
I actually want to get a chance to watch them as soon as I'm done with my Star Trek.
Yeah.
There's like
Yeah.
so much to watch, and now like
Yeah.
Game of Thrones is going to be starting in a couple of months, in April, I think,
Hmm.
the new series. And like I don't watch too much, television, so it's like there's
Yeah.
like only like a few series and movies that I actually do, pay attention to. So um yeah, but like with this whole marathon going on, like if I think about another marathon, like I'm gonna have such a difficult time
Hmm.
juggling it all. A lot of, with
Hmm.
reality going on, like I have other stuff to do too, right? So if every single time I sit down to watch Star Trek and I'm like, oh man, just one more episode before, I'm like telling myself just one more episode before bed, just one more episode, and then
Yeah.
before I know it, it's like 4 in the morning, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh Jesus Christ, like I can't, But it's very addictive though, so and
It
it's
is.
very
Yeah.
entertaining too. And the fact that I don't watch too much shows, I kind of justify it. I feel like, yeah, like it's okay, I do this. But yeah, Star Trek, it kicks Star Wars ass.
I agree too. Hey.
Yeah.
Yeah. All the way, man.
Yeah. Live long and prosper.
And on that note, I guess we should kind of wrap it up. God, how long have we been talking now? Like an hour and a half, 2 hours and a half or something?
Yeah, 2.5 hours, I think. Yeah.
Yes, they're like, goodness, we still have one viewer. It's probably Andy. Hi, Andy. I know it's probably Andy.
Or maybe they're just on, but then they kind of like looking through the browser, doing their own thing
Yeah.
in the background.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I just want to thank everyone and who will watch this and who's watching it now. Thank you so much. And thank you, Aki, for being on. And I'll let you say goodbye.
Thank you for having me on the show, Amber. Um, it was, and I'm so sorry that I was late.
Oh, don't worry about it.
So much difficulties like on the road, and then when I got home, um, maybe we could have been finished like an hour ago if I had actually showed up on time, right? So I'm so sorry to have kept you waiting.
No, it's
It was
fine.
just a fantastic conversation. It was very fun, informative, and we should do this again. We should definitely do
Yeah.
this again. And
Well, Clarissa couldn't make it today, but she wants to be on next time. I'm sure you've seen her. She wants to be on next time when you come on.
she's the one on your profile picture.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, it's we should do this again, and we should get our geek on more. As soon as I
Oh,
finish with
definitely.
my Star Trek, I'll have more information, more stuff to talk about.
Cool beans. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed talking to you, and I'll see you on Twitter.
Oh, you say cool beans a lot.
I do. Do I? I do say that a lot,
You
don't
did. You say it a lot.
I?
I think you actually also tweeted that too. Cool beans.
Oh, I did. Yeah, I did. Okay, y'all. Till next time.
Take care.
Bye.